Belias is a grand duchy in the northernmost region of the empire. A tender young woman sadly looked at the snowstorm raging outside the window. Today here, in this kingdom of cold, she became a wife. The owner of this place, Archduke Vars Belias, is a highly respected hero, and at the same time a feared murderer. When he was 9 years old, he buried his father, who died in battle himself. He pretended to be a war orphan for 2 years, collecting horse manure from the man who killed his father. In the end, Vars managed to earn his trust, and then he showed his true nature towards him. After many years of hidden pain and suffering, he brutally avenged his father's death. For a long time he was criticized, called dishonest, but this did not particularly bother him, since it was he who led all the empire's wars to victory, and he spent the next 16 years of his life on the battlefield. But he had a problem that greatly frightened those around him. When the full moon began, a real bloodthirsty beast awoke in him, and then he killed everyone who stood in his way. Then they began to call him a war hero, and at the same time a bloodthirsty murderer. And she, Selene, became Archduchess Belias today. On this cold winter day, she married this cruel murderer. Even during the wedding ceremony, the man's gaze was extremely terrifying. But why did Vars choose her, whom any princess or noblewoman was willing to marry if he asked? Why did he decide to choose Selena, an orphan, who only had her name as a dowry? Perhaps because she is an incomparable beauty, or because he fell in love with her at first sight. No, he and love are completely different things. Vars only wanted a woman who would always be waiting for him at home, even if he stopped communicating. Since today, after the first night, Vars is going to lock his archduchess in her room for the rest of her days. I wonder how she herself knows all this. In fact, it was all due to the novel she was reading. Even for a romance fantasy, this is too much. And this book generally belongs to the dark tragedy genre. Yumi, you are reading your novels again. They say you're going to read the script. A friend shouted at her, and Yumi replied that she was barely finishing it, that it wasn't interesting to read yet. And when a friend asked her what kind of novel it was, the girl replied that it was of the tragedy genre. And she didn't like that. She really didn't like those works, but she still read everything. Of course, even if she read everything until the end, it won't do her any good, because starting today, she won't even be able to leave the room. And unfortunately, when she came to her senses, the wedding was already over and she had to wait for Vars in the room. There is no way to escape. There is a snowstorm outside. Besides, there is no money, no knowledge of the area, nor ability to survive. Furthermore, this body, although very beautiful, is too pampered, even in those times when there was no money, and she had to drown on nothing but rice and seaweed. She had more strength than now in this form. While waiting for her husband, Selena lay down on the bed, and, although she understood that it was over, her eyes stuck shut against the girl's will. After a while, the room door opened, and heavy footsteps were heard. The girl lay motionless, although she perfectly heard someone approaching the bed. This sound, it was Vars who entered the bedroom, Selena thought fearfully. In the book, he was called the Archduke Monster, which frankly is a bit unsettling. But is he really that scary? Selena looked directly and openly into the man's eyes. Vars Belias towered like a mountain over the girl sitting on the bed, and was very surprised by the way she was looking at him. "What are you doing here?" He looked at her very angrily, clearly not expecting to see her. "I'm sorry, I just closed my eyes for a while," Selena said apologetically, and she thought that he did not look like a monster. And embarrassed, she promised to move so that he too could lie down on the bed. Vars' expression did not change. He kept looking seriously at his now wife, and under this stern gaze, the girl awkwardly moved towards the edge of the bed. Now that he is in the room, it will be difficult for her to escape. Vars placed the kerosene lamp he had been holding in his hands on the table, and to the girl's great surprise, he ordered her to sleep, causing the girl to look at him surprised. "Sleep," the man repeated, clearly having no intention of explaining anything. Selena did not argue, and quickly covered herself with a blanket up to her nose. She thought he looked a little scary, but he was still very handsome, somewhat resembling a bear. Very cute. And why, in the original, did Selena faint upon seeing his face? With these thoughts, the girl fell asleep. Vars did not take his eyes off his newly made wife. Having settled very comfortably in their shared bed, the girl slept peacefully despite his presence. The man's fists clenched. He was torn by conflicting feelings. She is his wife now, and he has big plans for her, but she is just sleeping soundly. The bright rays of the winter sun touched the sleeping girl's face. Selena opened her eyes, and stretching shook off the remnants of sleep. She slept very well that night. Realizing she was alone in bed, the girl touched the spot next to her. There was no warmth, which meant that Vars slept elsewhere, the upset girl thought. She even felt a kind of loneliness and did not understand why she had to sleep separately. And only after the girl got out of bed and walked around the room did she notice that she was not alone in the room. Vars Velia sat at the table fully dressed and looked intently at the girl. His gaze was tenacious, terrifying, and expressed nothing good. But Selina noticed that in the light of day, he was even more handsome. "I didn't notice you were sitting here," the girl said, blushing. And her breasts, dressed in a tight chemise, swayed slightly. The next moment, Selina herself realized how revealing her attire was, and in front of whom she was standing. She instantly dove under the blanket, throwing off her slippers as she moved. What to do? She got married and is already at a man's house. Now she is truly married. Exactly the same thoughts tormented Vars Velia's yesterday he got married. Many people are afraid when they meet him and cannot even look him in the eyes. Even his servants tremble with fear, so he has no chance of creating a normal family. And yet this poor woman married a one-eyed man called the Monster of War. However, yesterday before going to bed, his gaze was so bright and open that it seemed she was not afraid of him at all. And even now the girl was not afraid of his terrifying appearance, but of the awkward situation. She, embarrassed, said that she didn't realize he was sitting in the room. "She is not afraid of me," the surprised man thought again. Selina timidly covered the cut on her chest. Was it done as if she saw him as a man? Vars painfully thought about all this, but still came to the conclusion that this could not be. How could he even think of such absolute foolishness? The man got up with the intention of leaving the room. The huge trembling lump under the blanket barely moved. Hearing sounds coming from the room, Selina carefully peeked her head out. It seemed like he was gone. The girl quickly jumped out from under the blanket, hoping he had left so she could change clothes. Without wasting a second, she opened the closet door intending to do so anyway. But the man turned out to be kinder than in the book, suddenly starting to behave rudely. And to take the prisoner, Selina grabbed the first dress she found and hoped this would not happen at all. Having decided that this dress was suitable, she thought about how to put it on, which holes to stick her hands into, regretting that she should have read the book more carefully. A few minutes later, the room door suddenly opened and Vars Velias appeared in the doorway. The girl was almost completely dressed, and yet she shuddered in surprise. But the man walked past her, paying no attention to his excited wife. He slowly approached the bed where she had recently been hiding, and from somewhere he pulled out a small container and began to pour a red liquid onto the bedding. Blood. Selina sank to the floor. Her legs suddenly no longer supported her. What is this? Is he really planning to summon a demon? It's not just a book with a tragic plot, but a real horror movie. And who is the victim? She thought in horror. And at that moment, Vars looked at her with his terrifying gaze. She was truly a victim. The girl was literally paralyzed by the horror of realizing it. "The floor is cold," the man said, offering her his hand. Surprised, Selina just stared with wide eyes at the wide male palm extended towards her. And Vars asked her to take his hand because the floor she was sitting on was very cold. Gratefully, she extended her hand in response. A little embarrassed, the girl sincerely thanked him for his concern. At that moment, Vars noticed that she was not completely dressed and offered to help her, to which the girl agreed, but she still had the impression of holding his hand. His hand was large and strong, the hand of a real man, and she could still feel his touch on hers. He definitely resembles a bear. Selina was embarrassed by her thoughts, and she blushed as Vars tried to help her fasten her dress, but he was also invaded by confusing thoughts, although just a second ago, he hadn't thought of anything like that. The girl's back was small, white, very thin compared to his huge hands, and when she touched his hand, he had the feeling that he could break it. The man's large hands carefully pulled the laces and remained frozen in place, each of them frozen by their own embarrassing thoughts. Selina tried to figure out why he stopped and slightly turned her head. The man suddenly pulled the laces of her dress because, surprising them both, someone knocked on the door. It was Anna, and she was allowed into the room. The head maid, Anna, volunteered to help Her Highness get ready. Selina smiled gratefully, rejoicing at the unexpected help. The man's hand, holding the thin laces, reluctantly lowered. Vars watched with some disappointment as his wife interacted with the maid. He felt a kind of emptiness inside him without her. He felt anger in his soul thinking about what would happen if she locked and barred this door. But he doesn't want her to escape from him that way. Selina, very embarrassed, remained calm while Anna helped her get ready. Vars ordered the maid to prepare everything for His Highness's dinner, and the maid bowed obediently. The next moment, Selina was left alone in the room, looking surprised at the closed door. The girl still thinks that the smell of blood is in the air. Therefore, she decided to ventilate the room by opening the window to the street. Selina's room was located quite high up, and from her window there was an excellent view of the nearby village. The cold winter air slowly entered, but it didn't bother her too much. Everything had gone well for her until last night. But in the original, Selina collapsed before her wedding night and was imprisoned. Vars publicly announced his retirement to devote himself to farming and continued to visit His Majesty's chambers. He didn't care about the state of the 20-year-old girl, who was so terrified she couldn't look him in the eyes. He was the most terrible beast. Selina was not immediately imprisoned, as in the original story, and frankly, in such a situation, the girl had no hope. If not today, she will never be able to escape from here. But hiding in the snow state without any preparation is the same as dying. "I'm coming in." Vars delicately knocked on his wife's room door, but no one answered him, and besides, he felt the gust of winter wind. So the man hurriedly opened the doors, fearing to see only an empty room. The girl was simply sitting in a chair facing the open window, paying no attention to the blowing wind. "She's not cold," the man wondered. He heard that she came from a warm region in the southwest of the country, or perhaps she likes cool weather. He realized it. The girl heard someone entering the room and turned around surprised. For a moment, she just looked at Archduke Varsvelias, who approached her. He even became somewhat sad that she was frightened just by looking into his eyes. The man's face was like an actor's, and his charm was completely to her liking. And Vars remembered that, after all, there was no fear in the girl's eyes. And he realized that if she had skipped lunch, she wasn't hungry. Selina almost laughed. This whole situation resembled a lion communicating with a small hare, when the big one, and terrifying Leo, is trying to feed the baby. But still, laughter burst from the girl's closed lips and Vars noticed it. He was surprised that she seemed to enjoy being asked if she was hungry. It is worth dwelling on this point and listening to Maid Anna on behalf of Her Highness. His Highness never had the opportunity to deal with women, since he was on the battlefield from a very young age. So he attended only a few receptions of the imperial family, but not a single lady addressed a word to him. And if they met Vars' eyes, they immediately turned away in horror, because a chilling horror literally emanated from the man. And since he only inspired fear, His Highness never spoke to a woman. Laughing, Selina said she would like to go out, but immediately closed her mouth in horror, fearing that she would be locked up for such insolence, because she said it only under the influence of the situation, and the Archduke would never let her leave, although she really wanted to feel freedom. But Vars had no intention of locking her up. Instead, he extended his large hand. The girl looked surprised at the outstretched palm, not understanding what was happening. "You don't need to get up to go out now," he commented upon seeing the girl's indecision. After a while, Selina followed Vars, trying to keep up with him. She didn't understand if she needed to dress like this. It was difficult for her to even walk in those clothes. And yet, the girl liked that he personally helped her dress. The memory of this, it even made her feel embarrassed. At that moment, the Archduke stopped and looked at her expressively. Selina took this as a sign that she was slow and should hurry up. But the man only offered her his elbow for support. The girl stared intently at the strong man's hand and said nothing. Finally, she realized that he was inviting her to take his arm, or perhaps he accidentally just bent his arm that way. And she accidentally realized it, but was still unsure, so she decided to do nothing. But she began to worry because Vars kept looking at her and offering her his elbow. Lieutenant Jarthein August told the Archduke that when a woman is dressed in uncomfortable clothes, it is good manners to offer her to take his hand. And if a person does not feel burning hatred, he will not refuse to be accompanied. It cannot be said that they became friends, but now they are spouses, and unlike others. She was not afraid of him. But what the hell is this? Why did she refuse to take his arm? In any case, he brought the woman here only to conceive a child. So why is he worried about her? It would be better to just lock her up. Starting tomorrow, she will no longer see the world. At that moment, Selina's foot tripped on a small ledge on the hall carpet, and with a loud, sharp cry, the girl began to fall to the floor. But before she had time to fall, Vars immediately jumped up and grabbed Selina. The girl was grateful that he caught her, but at the same time she was very embarrassed. Her hand, against her will, touched the man's thigh, and she noticed it was hard as a rock. Vars also felt a little embarrassed by the situation, although he managed to catch the falling girl. To do this, he had to wrap his arms around her, and he noticed that her waist was very thin, and she herself was so light that she weighed like a rabbit. We probably have to fatten her up so she gains weight before winter. We need to hang more tapestries in the room, light the fireplace, and insulate the windows. Sitting, embracing his wife on the hall floor, the man thought that she should not leave. Vars Belias was a man who lived and died without knowing love. A poor man who was alone his entire life and died without understanding what loneliness was, despite being married to a beautiful girl. In the original story, Selina suffered from Stockholm Syndrome. The story says that at some point she slowly but surely fell in love with Vars. What about Vars? Unfortunately, for him Selina was just a woman who would give him a son. Reading this work in her world, the girl sincerely sympathized with the difficult fate of the heroes. However, now she seems to understand why Selina opened her heart to him. When she was about to fall, suddenly, he rushed towards her with a look of surprise and hugged her tightly with his hands. At that moment, she accidentally touched his strong thighs and chest. The smell of wood coming from his neck made her head spin. Blushing from the surprise and awkwardness of the situation, the girl thought he had skin made of wood. Although it wasn't actually like that. She knew it wouldn't be easy for her, but she didn't expect it to be this much. In the original story, he is described as a terrible monster. But in real life, Vars is so sweet, gentle, and attentive, completely her type. And if she keeps finding him like this, then she will fall in love with him. And not only because he is completely her type, but because she has never dated anyone. The girl painfully thought about everything that was happening, and Vars extended his hand to her again. And he asked her if walking was so hard for her, so why didn't she take his hand? Wait, the man insisted, causing Selina to blush again. And she could no longer refuse him, so she returned his hand and thanked him for his care. Soon they went out into the cold, icy air, and vapor immediately came out of the girl's mouth. She looked around with delight and noticed that this was truly a magnificent place. And although it was dark and cold, the girl happily breathed in the air of freedom. The Archduke silently watched the girl, who was very happy to be on the street. He thought that warmth was still far away, so the view was not pleasant. So what use was that deserted place and twisted branches to her? The Archduke watched the girl, her face charmed, and then how she looked around at all the grayness surrounding her. But she was very happy and smiled, pleased to finally be able to go out. Although Vars didn't fully understand the reasons for her good mood, he was happy to look at her. Realizing her feelings, he blushed and hurried to turn away, promising himself that he would no longer look. At that moment, Selina realized that this was not a set. It looked like a real medieval one. That it actually was. When she was in the theater group, she imagined she was in Hollywood, but all of this is real. However, after that her mood dropped and the smile disappeared from her face. What use is this scenery if, like in the original, she has to live locked up, unable to return to Korea? If she cannot escape, she at least wants to capture this man's heart. She had never built a relationship, especially a romantic one, which made her feel sad. Vars also noticed the change in his wife's mood and became a little worried. Why did she have such a downcast expression on her face? The man started to get annoyed. Just a minute ago, she was rejoicing at seeing the castle and the empty hills. The man approached the girl and very abruptly pulled her hand. She suddenly realized that this monster was her husband. At such a sudden movement, Selina looked at the Archduke in surprise. "It's time to go back," he said emotionlessly, without explaining his behavior in any way. Angry with himself, he turned around and headed towards the house. He brought her here, so why can't she even open her mouth? "Wait," said Selina, which made Vars stop. Embarrassed and unable to look at him, the girl asked to take his hand. With these words, the man literally melted. He was pleased to receive so much attention from her, and he thought that a long stay in the cold might weaken her. Besides, she was not that resilient and could collapse exhausted on the way. At that moment, theatrical actions developed in the man's head. The fragile girl falls exhausted and falls directly into his arms, and he, like a true gentleman, takes her in his arms to carry her inside the house, and quietly promises her that he will carry her if it is difficult for her. At those moments, according to the pensive man, they can embrace. Vars felt like she could fall at any moment, but the girl walked quite confidently, much to his regret. The young people returned to the room, where Anna had already lit the fireplace. They walked in silence, and Selina wondered why Vars remained silent. The man looked at the girl silently and attentively, without uttering a word. Selina felt the need to say something right now. Otherwise, it would be somewhat awkward. What a peaceful atmosphere, the girl suddenly said, smiling widely. Vars was surprised by her definition of the situation and nervously swallowed. The Archduchess added that she greatly enjoyed today. The view was simply breathtaking, and that sometimes it would be nice to walk like this together. The man was surprised again that she was only talking about going for a walk. She is not afraid of him. Recently, he was going to lock her in the room. So what has changed now? Selina looked intently at the Archduke, wondering why he was looking at her like that, and Vars realized that it was all because of her eyes. When she looks into those eyes, he always feels as if she is forcing him to act. How is it possible that he, Vars Velias, the cruel Archduke, cannot resist those looks? He must not forget his original goal, and the man took the cloak from the girl's hands. She just had to give birth to his baby, and they could do it today. Vars, the girl asked interrogatively, and smiled dazzlingly. And her smile lit up everything around her, making the man feel warmth spreading inside him. First of all, you need to sleep, he said, blushing, deciding that she was tired today, so he would have to wait until tomorrow. A new winter day has arrived, and birds are singing outside the window. Selina woke up slowly, feeling warmth throughout her body. Turning her head, she saw Anna throwing firewood into the fireplace. Anna also noticed that Her Majesty had woken up and greeted her lover. Selina's Confucian respect suddenly flared up, and she asked Anna not to address her that way, because it made her uncomfortable when someone older than her communicated with her like that. But Anna categorically asked if the lady was going to treat everyone who addressed her officially in this manner. At first, Selina was taken aback by the maid's tone, speechless. But after a moment, she felt embarrassed realizing that Anna was right. Composing herself, she said that she was raised as a commoner and that her manners are not at such a high level, that she still doesn't know how to react in some situations. And she would love it if Anna could help her with this. Anna understood everything, and as the lady said, she doesn't know many things, but the girl's tone and diction are not bad. One might assume that the newly crowned Archduchess could learn everything quickly. But first, she needs to have breakfast. After breakfast, having enjoyed the food and the warmth, Selina lay down on the bed and wondered what she should do now. A sudden thought made the girl jump in bed. If you think about it, no one told her not to leave the room. In the original, Selina was locked in a dungeon, but she is not yet. She needs to go out for some fresh air and enjoy the sun. The mere act of vegetating in the room depresses people, and the girl resolutely put on her cloak. But she didn't have time to leave, colliding with Anna at the threshold. The head maid asked very sternly where the lady was going. Startled by the unexpectedness, Selina, frightened, tried to explain that she wanted to go out, that she felt trapped and was very close to depression. At the same time, Selina wondered if Anna was really guarding the door. But then she noticed a cart with food behind her and realized that it was lunch. The maid asked if the lady wanted to have lunch, but the girl wondered if it would be difficult to carry all this outside. Anna was surprised that it was the Duchess who was preparing to go for a walk, because she was going out to get food. Why would the lady go out? But she added aloud that there was a table near the hallway, and if the lady had lunch there, she could feel the atmosphere of a picnic, which made Selina very happy, and she wanted to go there as soon as possible. Anna added that she would prepare everything. After a while, everything was ready, and the food was set on the table. Selina sat at the table and looked with delight at the served dinner. But she was embarrassed that an outdoor picnic required the use of so many utensils. Timidly, she took her fork, hoping that if she made a mistake, Anna would point it out to her. The maid thought that she hadn't decided yet what and how to teach Her Highness. And then I remembered how the Lord had previously said that the girl he would bring would not need to be taught anything, since she would live locked up only as an incubator for the air. But judging by yesterday and today, everything is completely wrong. Previously, while tidying the bed after the master's wedding night, Anna noticed blood on the sheet and immediately realized that it was animal blood. She is the only one who knows the difference between human and animal blood, besides the master. And this blood was probably intended to be shown to the maids of the outer palace. To avoid rumors that the wedding night was not spent, the gentleman performed such a generous act. Could this man, the famous and cruel Archduke, perform such a noble act? He has suddenly lost his mind, Anna thought. However, it is clear that the Archduchess had a tangible influence on his behavior. Perhaps Her Majesty will become a ray of hope for the north. This may stop the master's fuss. Selina called the maid, which made her immediately direct her attention to her. Selina confidently declared that today she was going for a walk and asked if there was anything she should know. Anna understood that the lady's words meant that she was going to leave the palace, and they clearly weren't just referring to a walk, but she could never let her go alone, so she said she would go with the lady. At that moment, Vars Velias was working in his office. Rather, he tried to work, realizing that his thoughts were occupied with something completely different. Does he need to say that he is going to lock her up? Of course, Vars was going to lock her up for no reason, but this is too much. And if it seemed to her that he considered her a thing, the man was horrified. But that was his goal, and he knows he is acting like a hypocrite. But he himself needs a reason to do it. He doesn't want to treat her as harshly as he planned. Not understanding what was happening to him, Vars got up from the table and paced nervously to the window. Trying to distract himself somehow, he looked intently out the window at the street. And what he saw surprised him greatly. Selina and Anna were talking on the street, right below the windows, and the man was interested in what they were doing there. A moment later, they headed straight for the palace exit. She is really going out, the man thought worriedly, and his concern was growing because she was really trying to escape. This will not happen while she is with Anna, but what if there are too many people there? Vars, completely alarmed, jumped quickly out of the room thinking that he urgently needed to catch up with these two. Selina looked with delight at the village they had arrived at with Anna. She realized that this world is quite respectable, and although she doesn't know much about old things, there are many people in the market, and they are even buying something. She had the impression of being on a trip, and it was the first time she was in such an unusual place. But the reality here is not like she read. Unlike the original, Vars was quite friendly. And also yesterday, when he offered her his hand, the memories of yesterday made the girl blush again and sink into delight. She, of course, does not know for sure, because she has never been in a relationship. But that moment was similar to a couple's relationship. But on the other hand, it was about Archduke Vars Velias, famous for his cruelty. And this thought brought the girl down from heaven to earth. Yes, she can only dream. She can go for a walk without being locked up, but his character will not change. And yet, she wants to get along with Vars. He is her ideal type. Remembering that she was not alone on the walk, Selina exclaimed in surprise. She asked why Anna was standing and offered to sit next to her. Maintaining decorum, the maid nodded and thanked the lady. But she was in no hurry to sit down and looked suspiciously over her shoulder. There, in the corner of the nearest house, there was a man who had been watching them for a long time. A little earlier, Bar hastily ran up the stairs, hoping that Anna and Selina had not yet left the door. He rushed past the assistant, thinking only that she was really trying to run away from him. And I felt a burning desire to catch her right now and throw her into the bedroom. Vars rushed out into the street, just as Selina and Anna were leaving the door. The girl at that moment admired the nice sunny weather and looked very happy. Therefore, the man slowed down nearby, trying to catch his breath after a long run. Besides, he realized something. Selina is an ordinary person who hasn't developed intuition, cannot hide from the supervision of Anna, who was granted the title of Knight of the Empire. So why the hell is he so worried? Vars asked mentally. Well, from this distance, he could catch her if something happened, the Archduke thought. While gesturing to Anna to continue her way, the gaze of the night maid indicated that she accepted the task from the master. The entire time Selina was walking through the village. Accompanied by her, Vars was watching her, arousing suspicion among local residents. He thought that if the girl tried to escape, he would catch her and tie her up. He needed a good reason to lock her up. And here she was. If something else had happened, the Archduke wondered as he watched the girls sit by the fountain, and they remained sitting there for a long time. And nothing broke the awkward silence between them. The person who kept looking at Selina was surprised that she didn't get tired of sitting in one place. And why did she go out if she wasn't going to do anything? She really just wanted to scout the situation. Vars wondered if maybe he should just leave here. Today, for no apparent reason, he left all the work to Yart, and he even regrets it a little. Thinking this, Vars Velias followed the girls, thus ceasing to hide behind the house. The locals immediately saw him and recognized their master greeting him. However, although they behaved respectfully, their hands trembled slightly with fear. Vars looked at them and immediately turned away. He knew what they were thinking. Their master is a murderer worse than the devil himself. Although they feel safe, they get scared when they see him in front of them. In any case, it is important for him now not to lose sight of Selina. The girl smiled happily, satisfied with her little walk. A barely perceptible smile, also appeared on the Archduke's face. Yes, now only this is important to him, and nothing else. Oh, it's so fresh. I went for a walk and took a bath. All that remains is dinner. The girl dried her wet hair, humming cheerfully. And when they knocked on the door, she, without hesitation, allowed him to enter. And only then did she think that she needed to put on a dress. But the door had already opened, and Bars entered the room, who saw a nearly naked girl in front of him, wrapped only in a towel. Startled, the girl shouted loudly, trying to cover herself with a second towel. And the man froze, stunned by what he saw. But the next moment, he realized that he should step back and close the door. Nervously, resting his head against the door, he thought that she had already washed, dined, and now she was resting, because he himself managed to do all this and even prepared a gift for her. Regretting by the door, he thought that she didn't like him anyway, so now she hates him too. What a shame. This whole scene with the door was observed by Anna, who brought dinner to the lady, and she asked the knight, in surprise, what had happened. Selina at that moment collapsed on the floor, exhausted. She was almost going crazy naturally. She thought it was Anna. What will happen to her now? Because Vars might not like her behavior, although he knows it scares people. And then he could easily throw her in prison. Crawling on the floor frustrated, the girl prayed to the universe to give her another chance. A hum was heard behind her, and she realized with fear that she was not alone in the room again. Caring hands threw a warm cloak over the girl's shoulders. You'll catch a cold. Bars decided to take care of his annoying wife. The girl looked at him with clear, wide eyes. She was pleased with his concern. Confused and looking down, Selina thanked the Archduke for his kindness. Kindness, I am the one who is kind. Bars almost choked with indignation, but still, he decided that there was nothing wrong with this. And composing himself, he replied ceremoniously that there was nothing to thank for, and added that he would be outside, so that she could call him as soon as she changed. Since he wants to have dinner together, at these words, Selina almost choked from shock. This will be the first time they have dinner together. It seems it wasn't like that in the original. Or is he waiting for her to make a mistake? The girl cut the meat on her plate vaguely. Looking at her, Vars felt overwhelmed by bad thoughts, and darkness literally emanated from the man. Selene raised her beautiful eyes and inquisitively looked at the Archduke. Because of her gentle smile, the man's heart tried to jump out of his chest, and a pleasant warmth spread throughout his body. But dark thoughts did not leave him, and Vars, in a fit of anger, squeezed the fork in his hand tightly. What is wrong with this girl? No one dared to do this. How could she touch his body with such indifference? How could she hold his gaze? As if he was the only one who felt strange. With these thoughts, Vars placed a gift on the table. Selina asked in surprise what it was, and if she could open it. It's a gift, open it, the man replied calmly. But when the girl opened the box, she was literally blinded by what was inside. And inside, there was a rich and brilliant set of jewelry, consisting of a necklace and huge earrings with precious red stones. Like any girl, Selina's eyes shone with such beauty, and she couldn't believe this reality was true. It may not mean much to him, but it is the first gift she has received from a man. Selina doesn't know what others are like, but Vars tries to be kind to her. It is definitely very different from the original. Perhaps they can get along well. The girl was happy to see a ray of hope. However, Vars' thoughts were the exact opposite. He was happy that she didn't suspect anything. Everything was already settled. Trusted people told the jewelers, and pawn shops the serial number of the jewelry. If someone came and wanted to sell them, he would simply have to issue a check for 1,000 pieces of gold. And then, when they arrived at the palace with this jewelry, they would be rewarded. Selina will be caught trying to sell the gift, and that will be the end. Once she tries to escape, everything else will be easy. All you have to do next is treat her like a thing, which is what was originally planned. Just let yourself be caught, and from that day on you will cry every day. These were the thoughts of Bars Velias, who planned everything carefully. And so their meal together passed. On one side, the happy Selina, who received her first gift from her husband, and on the other, Bars, anticipating her future suffering. The next day, Selina went out for a walk with Honor again, without noticing the eyes watching her. The Archduke watched his wife attentively, anticipating the unfolding events. So far, everything is going according to his cunning plan. And his money, though small by the standards of the ruler of the North, was not spent in vain. He warned Anna, so all that remains is to wait. Unable to stay still, the man grabbed his coat and headed for the exit. At the age of 9, disguised as an orphan, he entered the enemy camp. And 2 years later, he returned with his enemy's head in his hands, and his body turned into something lifeless. Having recovered his health, Vars returned to war at the age of 13. Since then, no one has ever seen Archduke Velias look inappropriate. These thoughts overwhelmed the Lord's assistant Yard, who watched the gentleman's hasty departure. And yet, he was glad that spring had finally arrived inside the gentleman. Yard worried about him with all his heart. On a sunny day, Selina and Anna visited the village market. The girl was happy and calmly chose the goods she was going to buy. What the hell is Vars doing watching them? He started to get annoyed. The only things she bought were 2 apples, chicken skewers, and a disgusting-looking leather wallet. This will not help her escape at all. The man was angry, and although he wore a black cloak that hid his identity, the black aura surrounding him gave him away. And those around him guessed that it was the Archduke. Vars was angry, waiting for the girl to show her true colors, and was unhappy that he couldn't hear their conversations. At that moment, Selina thoughtfully stopped at one of the counters, perhaps about to make a mistake. But the girl only thought about the purchase for a short time. But again, no, she just bought a small basket which, according to Vars, is useless. Seeing the girls leave, the man was indignant because she needed to buy something simple and spacious. They were useless. Maybe now she will make the mistake of stopping near a shoe store. That's right, you need shoes with which you can run well, durable and with low heels. Selina stopped for a second and soon passed the shop. Vars could barely contain the anger that erupted. But how could one be like this? What the hell did she want to buy? And if so, why did she leave as soon as she smelled money? Well, that's all Vars was worried about at that moment, while Selina and Anna were about to enjoy the barbecue. The girl at that moment looked completely satisfied and happy, and simply smiled sweetly. But Vars didn't understand how she could smile so radiantly. He didn't take his eyes off her for a moment, noticing everything she did. But he has no idea why she is laughing now. A completely unsuspecting Selina chatted pleasantly with Anna while enjoying an impromptu picnic. So, what made her laugh? Varsvilias didn't understand absolutely anything. The chicken skewers are delicious, the girl admired. She still had a lot of money left, and the weather was very nice. In response to her thoughts, a strong cold wind immediately blew, and Selina shivered from the cold, feeling as if pieces of ice had passed over her skin. And it reminded her of what happened yesterday, when Vars threw a blanket at her. Then she felt real human warmth. When he took her hand, it was so strong that it supported her entire weight. When the girl thinks about this, she keeps smiling to herself. In this world, the loneliness of Vars Velias was destined. But she also felt very lonely when she was Yumi. No one cared about her. There must be a reason why the two met and became spouses. Why does she think everything will go well for them? No, she wants everything to go well. Soon everyone returned to the palace. Heading to his wife's room with a gift, Vars thought she would feel uncomfortable if she was in a bathrobe again like yesterday, so he decided not to rush in, not to mention that he wouldn't like it if it happened again. In the hallway, the man thoughtfully looked at the box he held in his hands. At that moment, the door to Selina's room quietly opened and, looking around, the girl left the room. She quietly closed the door behind her, trying not to let anyone hear her. Is this really an escape? Vars had an unpleasant idea, but to some extent he was prepared for it. Hidden behind curves and objects in the hallway, the man silently followed the girl. Selina, who had been walking calmly and even somewhat cheerfully, stopped for a moment. The girls timidly touched their hair that fell over their eyes, as if preparing before an important meeting. And while Selina gathered the strength to do what she had planned, Vars jealously watched her behavior, in front of whom she showed herself and whose room this was. The next moment, the man realized that this was her room, and Selina was heading to meet him. Feeling some panic, Vars ran in different directions, not knowing what to do. Then a door at the opposite end of the hallway caught his attention. It was Selina's bedroom. For some time, he wondered if he should go to this particular room, but he still decided against it. He could not enter there without permission, and headed towards the balcony that led to the hallway. Without thinking, he opened the window and jumped from the balcony. Grabbing the branch of a tree growing near the house, the man easily jumped onto the neighboring balcony and entered her room. After catching his breath and leaving the box, which he still held in his hands, on the table, he exhaled in relief. Straightening his clothes and returning his breathing to normal, Vars carefully approached his room door. He opened it as if he were about to leave, startling Selina quite a bit with the unexpected action. Without any difficulty breathing, and as if that was the way, he invited the girl inside. Okay, just me, the surprised Selina could reply. She sat in front of the brightly burning fireplace, feeling a great sense of discomfort. Vars stood by the wall far enough from her and said nothing. Realizing that she had to do something, the girl patted the bench next to her, inviting her husband to sit down. He, of course, was a little embarrassed and froze, not knowing what to do. But he still sat on the bench, although not next to the girl, but on the opposite side from her. Then he simply carefully moved closer to her, which made the girl think he looked like a bear cub. Indeed, her opinion of him changed. He was so cute. She took apples out of the basket she had brought and offered to eat them together, as she bought them today. And they looked very tasty. She gave an apple to Vars and held hers with both hands. Without wasting time, the girl sunk her teeth into the juicy red apple, surprising her husband with her behavior. Looking at her, the man was convinced again that she looked like a small rabbit. And following her example, he also tried the apple. The girl laughed cheerfully. His behavior seemed funny to her. But the Archduke himself didn't understand what she found funny. Maybe she was eating apples in a strange way. Sorry if my laughter offended you, that's not what I meant. And the girl showed him her apple. The apple in her hands was only lightly bitten, while Vars' apple was almost half chewed. Selina was simply surprised that he could bite so much at once, and how different his bite was from hers. Confused, Vars thought that everything about her was small. Her bite, her height, her face, and also her hands, and something else. With these thoughts, the man blushed, realizing they were too frank. Unable to bear the embarrassment any longer, he suddenly straightened up to his full height, surprising the girl. I have prepared a gift, he said stiffly and moved to the side. The box Vars prepared contained new and neat shoes, and Selina was delighted with their appearance and wanted to try them on immediately. But moments later, the girl remembered that she was wearing a tight and heavy skirt, which was quite difficult to put on. Realizing what the problem was, Vars knelt in front of her and offered to help. Carefully lifting her skirts and taking the girl's leg in his hands, he began to change her shoes. She really had such a small leg that Vars felt embarrassed. Selina also felt embarrassed, because the man's hand was much larger than her leg. Soon the act was done, and the girl had new shoes on her feet. Then Vars looked at her. Thank you, I like them very much, Selina replied happily. She lifted her leg, examined it all around, and asked Vars which one also suited her. The girl was absolutely sincere in her emotions, but the man didn't understand what was happening to him. For some reason, it seemed to him that he was going crazy, although she was just laughing. Snap out of it, he tried to reason with himself, but he couldn't contain the shame that came over him. Now that she has comfortable shoes, she will definitely run away, Vars was sure. But to escape the cold north, without any connection, she really hates him so much that she is ready to die. She smiles a lot, but she is about to run away. Selina decided to return to the previous lesson and offered to finish the apples. Vars could not refuse her and immediately agreed. He sat down next to the girl again, a little farther away from her. Then Selina herself moved closer to him, which really surprised Vars and even scared him because of what she wanted to do to him. And why does she smile so often when she looks at him? For some reason, this question hung in the air and made the man sit like a statue. She was really going to spend the night here, Vars realized. And this made him a little angry and clench his fists. Go back to your room, he said in a colorless voice. Finding himself alone in the room, the man cursed at himself mentally. What the hell was he doing? He was going to treat her, as he originally planned if she escaped. But if she really runs away, it seems he won't be able to control his anger. While changing clothes, he noticed that she had forgotten her item on the bench. Taking the small, neat cloak in his hands, Vars himself didn't know what he wanted to do with it. At that moment, Selina returned to her room and closed the door behind her, confused. What is wrong with this Duke monster? She wondered. Selina was definitely right. Vars completely matches her description in the book. But why? Why the hell? 3 nights have already passed, and the original story hasn't started. Yes, at first she liked it, because he seemed to pay attention to her and he hadn't locked her in a dungeon yet. But after 1 or 2 days, she became more and more anxious. If nothing happens, then something is wrong, she came to the logical conclusion. In the book, Selina's identity was not properly revealed. It seems she is a fool, the girl realized. Perhaps Selina in the original was as beautiful as the main character of the romantic comedy, and not as timid as she is, so much so that they had to keep her locked up. She is truly so charming. All was lost. It seemed there was no hope left for a better future. She will not be able to become the same Selina, and her life will be over. But today's atmosphere was not conducive to kissing. The girl spoke very seriously about this. She felt the romance in the air. But her words about her returning to her room ruined everything. She really wants to please him. So why isn't it working? He really doesn't feel anything for her. It is really only she who wants to hug, kiss, and hold hands. She doesn't understand anything because she has never had a boyfriend. The annoyed girl suddenly looked at her feet, shod in new shoes. She is happy with the gift. But in Korea, it is believed that if you give shoes to your loved one, they will run away. Such a gift means the same here. It seems it is not convenient for her. And therefore, he tells her to leave alone. The new day that arrived was the same as all the previous ones, cold and icy. Yart flew to the master's room with urgent news. Last night, a young man appeared and noticed that Archduke Barsvelias was already sitting in a chair in a bad mood. After catching his breath, the assistant said that this young man was from the village of Kimmelin in the southwest, and he declares that he came here looking for his missing girlfriend named Selina. They could not marry officially, but they promised to marry. Zart thought with regret that a thaw had finally occurred in the master's life. But such an incident changed everything. Has the ground melted already? The Archduke suddenly asked. A very frightening image appeared before Yart's eyes. He knew the master wanted to bury this young man. And he answered yes. It has been a month since the beginning of spring, and the ground is ready for a shovel. As expected, Bars thought, if she is beautiful in his eyes, then she is also beautiful to others. He is a terrible person who failed to realize this. Having finished thinking, he asked where this young man was now and received the answer that he was in the basement. The Archduke expressed the desire to look at the man who came here, blinded by love, to understand what he was like. Did you hear that they say Lady Selina got married? The boy told the news to his friend. A boy slightly older than him asked in surprise what he was saying. He was interested to know exactly where Lady Selina got married, and the young man replied that somewhere very, very far in the north. A person like her shouldn't live in a village like this. After all, she is a noble person. Madame Selina wore expensive clothes and jewelry, of course. Drinking tea elegantly suits her much better than communicating with common people. But when she became like that, she is happy now. The young man is neither rich nor that smart. But he felt something for Selina and persistently asked his friend to tell him more about everything. And although no one knew exactly where she was, but once you saw her face, you would never forget it, and if he wants to see her again, he will be able to find her. He will definitely achieve what he wants, no matter the cost. Come with us. The guards turned to him, who clearly would not tolerate objections. He opened his eyes with difficulty, seeing several pairs of legs in front of him, and behind them a grate. Consciousness slowly returned to him. He found himself tied up and lying on the cold, drafty floor. Once he regained consciousness, the young man jumped to his feet and shouted what they were doing. Who were they, and what did they want from him? On the other side of the bars, 2 pairs of attentive eyes were watching him. Begin, ordered one of the men standing in front of him. A moment later, the guards surrounded him and grabbed him, forcing him to kneel. He tried to escape, but they forcibly opened his mouth and poured a little liquid into him. Not understanding what was happening, the young man was forced to swallow what they gave him. And then the guards loosened their grip a little. In the village of Kimmelin, in the southwest of the country, you and a girl from there named Selina. Was there something between you? The chief asked. The young man felt his consciousness fading, as if clouded by some kind of poison. Selina, the beautiful Selina, like a bright sunny vision, the girl appeared before him. He wants to live only for her. He swears he will work his whole life for the sake of their children. Selina and I have loved each other forever, he said in a hoarse voice. We promise to stay together forever, he said, as if against his will, not realizing how grim the person in front of him was becoming. Yart silently followed the Archduke. He thought it would be just a spring breeze, but it turned out to be a whole storm. Abelanon is a poison that makes you lose your head and only tell the truth. Those who take it will tell the truth if they are not mentally strong enough to resist the poison. There aren't even enemy prisoners here to quench the master's bloodlust. The only way to prevent him from losing his temper is to watch him closely. You can do it, come on. The young man supported himself. Yart let him go, the Archduke suddenly ordered, and his smile was terrifying. The Archduke ordered the route to be made so that she would arrive via the terrace, next to the inner corridor. It was there that the table was set for Selina's little snack. The girl delightedly watched the butterflies fly. They too felt the warmth of spring, and they came out into nature. Butterflies, it looks like they want to fly over the wall, the girl observed, delighted. And Anna confirmed her observation, since there are no flowers here, and the butterflies are intensely trying to break through the palace walls. Agreeing with Anna, Selena thought they were somewhat similar to her. From birth to adulthood, regardless of her wishes, she was always thrown into a new environment, and she had to survive. She mentally supported the butterflies. Don't give up, they can do it, and she too will remain happy. She will definitely be happy. Selena turned around and saw Vars nearby. The man also noticed her gaze and was a little puzzled by the way she was looking at him. Perhaps it seemed to him that he composed himself and walked towards her. She really is an incredible girl. You just have to look at her, and time starts flying by like crazy. Vars is sure that others feel the same way when they see her. If a man who wasn't even her father hadn't sold her, she could have spent time with her loved ones. If she had grown up in an aristocratic family, could she have married and had children at that age? With what face would she whisper words of love to that person, that bastard who could be her husband? The man became indescribably enraged, as if the fire of war burned around him. But why is he like this, and wants to destroy everything that catches his attention? Perhaps he should kill him right in front of her eyes. And what method should he choose for it? Selena at that moment was very happy to see Vars, because she thought about him constantly, and she smiled radiantly. But the man became enraged, thinking that if she missed that man, even a little, he would crush his bones and throw him out to be devoured by wild animals. "Do I look good?" the girl asked, slightly lifting the hem of her dress and exposing her shoes. Just a second ago, Varsvilia's eyes were filled with the fury of jealousy. But when he saw the shoes on her feet, the fire in his soul seemed to go out. "The shoes you bought me." The man realized that although he knows nothing about fashion, even he thinks that the dress and the leather shoes do not match well. But still, he asked her if she felt comfortable, to which she replied that walking had become much easier, and that she was beautiful too. Feeling a little carefree again, he thought that simply walking lightly was not enough to escape here as fast as she could. "By the way, will you come with me today?" Selena asked, and seemed quite combative. Vars was literally bewildered by the unexpected question. He didn't understand what she was talking about or where she was inviting him to go. A little embarrassed, Selena added that she just wanted to go somewhere with him. Anywhere would do. The main thing is that they go together. She smiled with happiness. The bright rays of happiness radiating from Selena seemed to bounce off the gloomy figure of Vars Velias, who understood nothing at all. "From today, the inner palace is closed," Vars replied. His words unpleasantly surprised and even slightly scared the girl. "For me?" she asked in a choked voice, to which the man confirmed that he would stay inside. But not losing hope, Selena clasped her hands in a pleading gesture and looked at her husband with wide eyes. Unable to stand it, Barca added that since there is a lot of business now, he has to close it. This will last approximately 1 week, and afterwards, he offers to go horseback riding together. The girl again thought that she would be locked up, but after his words, she relaxed a little, and she was even happy for his promise. The Duke, in turn, thought that perhaps today Selena would be dead angry with him. But that's fine, because he won't share it with anyone else. And it will be better if she is empty, sad, and depressed because of him. Even if she has a small heart, he will not allow her to give it to someone else, especially to someone who is still alive. If he sees him die before his eyes, then everything will be over. Trying to change his mind, Vars thought he needed to get some air. Before that, it seemed to him that she liked the stars, so maybe she would go to the Lavella Berg forest. Lavella's night sky is known for how bright and beautiful it is, something he is sure she will love. At that moment, a noise was heard from the palace, and the young people paid attention. A very ragged-looking young man walked out of the back door and froze, hesitant. Selena thought this man was digging the earth. He looked very careless, but only Vars, Zart, Anna, and she can enter the courtyard, which means he is probably a servant. Deciding it was none of her business, the girl turned to her husband and said she didn't know how to ride a horse. When the Archduke asked her if she really didn't know how, Selena felt a little embarrassed. It was really so strange. Maybe all the women here know how to ride a horse otherwise. Why is he asking? But she has never been on a horse. Selena, suddenly a heartbreaking scream was heard next to her, which startled the girl. That young man, whom she mistook for a servant, fell to his knees in front of her and shouted that he had come all this way to meet her, so really she wouldn't even look at him. The startled girl stepped back sharply, and the thought passed through her head that this was not a servant. The thoughts in her head began to work hard. Maybe he appears in the book, but she doesn't remember reading about this. Maybe it's from the second part. The frightened girl, not understanding anything, hid behind the Archduke, and the young man was horrified by her actions. Now she is a married woman, and she doesn't even approach him. She doesn't hug him, but in reality, she doesn't even want to say anything. He began to get angry. How can one change their attitude so quickly? What a disgusting reaction. Selina, he shouted again, turning to the girl and demanding her attention. But the frightened Selina, hiding behind Vars, asked him in a whisper who this young man was. The Duke replied that he heard he was her lover, and they promised to always be together in their hometown. What did we promise? Selina exclaimed in surprise. An insidious and barely perceptible smile appeared on the Duke's lips. When suddenly she appeared behind him, he thought she would hit him for the sake of this man. But he didn't care. It turns out she hid behind him because she is afraid of this guy. It seems like she chose him. And to great joy, Barca feels nothing for this young man. Take him away, he signaled to the guards who were nearby. They immediately grabbed the young man and took him to the masters. Observing this whole situation, the girl sank tiredly to the floor, realizing that something was wrong here. If Bars knew about her past and organized her meeting with that person, then he wanted to see her reaction. Also closing the inner palace, he truly showed it to this person. If this is true, the girl's eyes filled with bitter tears. Bowing her head while kneeling in front of her husband, Selina burst into tears. Vars Velias definitely did not expect something like this from her. Bending down next to her, he asked what suddenly happened. What does all this mean? The girl proudly raised her head and looked at him with eyes full of tears. For the first time in his life, Vars Velias encountered the tears of a woman, whose cause was him. Did you want to hand this man over to me? He asked the girl accusingly. The Duke replied that he had never had such a thought, but the girl did not believe him, and she called him a liar. In fact, it was a lie. He was going to kill him right in front of her eyes. But Vars loudly replied that in reality, the young man wanted to see her face. And since he and Selina had something in common in the past, he decided to allow it. Having said that, the Duke looked at his wife and was shocked by what he saw. Although Selina was kneeling in front of him, and her eyes were clouded with tears, her entire appearance was very proud and fighting. You will do this to everyone who wants to look at me. Maybe later you will paint a huge portrait and hang it on the door. The Archduke tried to say that this young man was her lover in the past, but Selina interrupted. She really believed that just like that, and she called him here to meet her, a man she doesn't even know. In fact, what Vars said next, he didn't intend to tell her, but there was no way out. They gave him poison to drink, he said, looking the girl in the eyes. There's a liquid that, after drinking, a person cannot lie. Therefore, he is inclined to trust the words of this young man. What is not here? Selina thought, devastated. After all, this is a fantasy world. If this person is the other half of the real Selina, then she doesn't care if she meets her ex. The annoyed girl grabbed the hem of her dress in her hands, feeling more and more tears coming out. He was really so indifferent towards him. And Vars didn't understand why she wouldn't stop crying. If this continues, it will affect her health. He feels sorry and somehow uncomfortable. When everything was over, the Archduke poured glass after glass of wine, trying to drown out the unpleasant sensations. After drinking another glass, he placed it forcefully on the table, causing it to tinkle pitifully. Yard, who was next to the gentleman, noticed that he was drinking a lot. However, the gentleman did not stop, and the assistant thought worriedly that he was the stupidest of fools, that he didn't even understand that he secretly liked His Highness. For several days now, he has not paid attention to the frantic noise coming from the ladies' room. What man in this world would allow the girl he likes to meet her ex-lover? Either he sits silently, or he doesn't find a place for himself. Why does he only think in a negative and cruel way? This is a kind of perverse possessiveness. Sir, they say your highness is not eating well, Yart said, bowing towards the Duke. And at first moment, Vars was startled, but he recovered and asked calmly, and what about this? The gentleman offered to bring soup to the lady, thinking mentally that he would take care of everything. What am I, a servant according to you? The Archduke was indignant, but in the end, he accepted the servant's offer. And now, he stood with a tray in his hands in front of the door to Selina's rooms. They said she hadn't eaten anything for several days. What kind of strength could make a person cry for days on end? If she cries like this after meeting her ex, it's obvious who she is thinking about when she sobs. And Vars himself thought unflatteringly about himself. It would be better if these curses were directed at him and not at that guy. Instead of crying thinking about him, he would like her to cry disappointed in him. After gently knocking, the man entered the room with a tray and invited the girl to eat at least something. Noticing that someone had entered, Selena hid under the blanket like a wild animal, ready to pounce on the intruder at any moment. His gaze expressed nothing good in a hoarse voice. He asked her why he had come. The Archduke said he was not going anywhere, but the girl retorted that she had nothing to do with him. Besides, the inner palace was still closed. Realizing that she was right, Bars became annoyed by her response. Although she was not afraid and there were no difficulties, he was afraid. Now she doesn't feel it anymore and can say what she wants. At that moment, the girl turned her face towards him offended, which literally moved the man. Because she looked very sweet and disheveled, the girl was still angry with him and mentally wondered why he had come. Why was it necessary to give jewelry and then shoes? Why would he help her when she was falling? It really doesn't make sense. She doesn't understand anything because she has never known a boy. If this continues, then she never will. His anger literally erupted and into the air. Clearing his throat, the Duke decided to tell her news that should please her. The gates are open again. You must fulfill your promise to ride a horse with me. The girl calmed down instantly and asked him when he wanted to go. Her mood changed so quickly that both she and the Duke just looked at each other in silence for a while. Now, the man finally replied, being the first to break the silence, and with his answer, he left the girl in a stupor. However, it didn't take long to convince her, and within an hour Selena was ready for the planned horseback ride. She arrived at the stable first, which annoyed her a little. How could this happen? She cried so much because he never asked her if everything was all right. She didn't expect it, but it's really so hard to even wipe away a tear. Seeing Bars in front of her, she got angry again because he hadn't done absolutely anything. Bars, who was examining the horses, noticed Selena approaching him. In his eyes, she was beautiful, and although it was clear she was angry, she still looked cute. In fact, Vars didn't even suspect that she was angry. He just thought that these clothes suited her well too. Feeling a sense of joy, Vars prepared for the trip, while Selena was still angry. And Yart, passing between them, didn't understand what was happening. However, this whole situation tired the gentleman's assistant a lot. Camlin is a small village, so there are no suitable paths for horseback riding. Selena said that she cannot ride like this, that it is not suitable either. And how much fun she had in her village. Probably everyone there hunted with a bow or rode horses. All she was asked for was to give birth to a child, and therefore she did not study her past. She came here. Although he knew nothing about her, he thought everything would be fine. And if they knew about her past, Yard would never have brought someone like her. Well, thank God they didn't know anything, Vars thought, leading his horse by the reins. While bringing the horses, the man turned to Selena and invited her to ride the white horse. But the girl noticed that the white horse already had a large load on its back, and if she sat down, it would be very difficult for her. These words made Vars laugh a lot, and he laughed heartily. Then he told the girl not to worry, that this horse could be ridden by at least 5 people like her. It weighs less than a bun, and in general, in Vars' eyes, she looked like a small bunny. And scared. What's the problem? The girl thought. There are many more horses than she thought. And now Selena doubted whether she could ride it, because if you fall off a horse, you can die. She doesn't feel comfortable saying that, in case he gets angry. But Selena decided that she definitely couldn't. I can't go. Lowering her head, she gently touched Bar's clothes. The man did not understand. He thought she was joking, but fear increasingly gripped the girl, and she assured him that she was telling the truth, and that she didn't know how to ride a horse. Then Bars suggested learning to ride a horse and riding next time. Or can she ride with him on the same horse today? Upon hearing these words, the girl's thoughts sped up. Riding the same horse means sitting next to him. She might misunderstand him. If he turns on the green light like this, why is everything like this at such important moments? Is this really the sign, but aren't too many things happening? Composing herself, Selena added that if everything is ready, then they should do it this way. Surprising with her determination. Soon both approached the horse of Archduke Belias. Selena put her foot in the stirrup to get onto the tall horse. And the next moment, Bars, with an easy movement, lifted the girl and sat her in the saddle. He also instructed her to hold the reins tightly and place both feet in the stirrups, which she willingly obeyed. Vars himself jumped into the saddle behind her, pressing slightly against her back. Let's go, he added, trying not to press too hard. But still, he had to stretch his arms forward to take the reins, thus surrounding the girl on all sides. For some reason, Selena didn't worry, but instead started to calm down. Vars is the most powerful protagonist in this world, and turns out to be the main character. She was furious, but now she doesn't care anymore. The man didn't feel as calm as she did. In fact, they were in big trouble, because he couldn't think of her sitting in front of him, so close he can smell her and touch her hair. The aroma emanating from the girl was so sweet, and Vars wondered how she could be so sweet from behind, how the back could be so cute. But what worries him most is that both he and Selena are now wearing riding breeches, with only 2 thin pieces of fabric between them. Their bodies were so close to each other at hip level that it made the man blush, and he could barely contain himself. Heavy bags flew into the wagon with a crash. Anna asked Yard if they were preparing the carriage for the trip, and received an affirmative answer. The Lord asked the assistant to prepare and drive the carriage to Bellaburg. She thought about it and asked when, to which she received the answer, "At night. You are really planning to go at night. You are not thinking about anything." She looked at Yart reproachfully. The young man stepped back surprised, as if he had done everything right. The maid only exhaled tiredly, surprised by the knight's thoughtlessness. "It will leave at midnight. It should arrive at dawn," he said categorically. And despite Yart's indignation, he added that it would be better for everyone. Is that why he hasn't married yet? Finally, Anna realized. Yart remained standing with his mouth open, not understanding what to do. The knight ordered arrival at night, but Anna insisted that the carriage should not be ready until dawn. And what he should do. After thinking for a bit, he decided that Anna was quite capable of taking his head off if he disobeyed her. And mentally, asking forgiveness from his master, the knight decided to do what the maid told him. And it really should be better. In the cool sunset forest, a bright and warm fire burned strongly. Selena was cold, and Bars invited her to come closer, and he himself approached the girl. He added that he ordered them to be picked up at night, but apparently some problems had arisen, and at the same time, he threw his cloak over the girl's shoulders. Selena noticed that everything was fine. In fact, it was very quiet and cozy here. The man didn't show it, but he was happy with the whole situation and the fact that the girl was sitting with him. He mentally thanked the assistant for being late. And now Selena will tell you what happened to her today. She doesn't know how to ride a horse, so she rode in Var's arms. They arrived at a beautiful wooden house in the forest, and Vars, like a true gentleman, helped the lady down from the horse. As soon as her feet touched the ground and the man's hands let go, the girl felt as embarrassed as Bars. And to hide her awkward silence, Selena began to admire the impressive wooden house. And at the same moment Bars asked how about a barbecue for dinner. And now, sitting by the fire, they moved closer to each other to keep warm. Bars said he ordered them to be picked up at night, but apparently some problems had arisen. The girl assured him that everything was fine, and that she felt very calm and comfortable here. Although Bars said nothing in response, mentally he thanked Jart for this opportunity to be with his wife. "If you want a drink, alcohol should raise your body temperature," he suggested to the girl. And Selena happily agreed, hoping that everything would be fine. In Korea, she was also a drunkard and could easily drink 3 bottles of soju in one. Bars took out a bottle of wine and asked her if she had drunk it before. Selena replied that she doesn't really like wine. For some reason, it has an astringent taste. Hearing this answer, the Archduke suggested that since she didn't like wine, how about whiskey? Selena was waiting for this and immediately agreed, holding a glass in her hands, into which a man poured an alcoholic beverage. The girl was delighted to try whiskey for the first time. As soon as the glass was full, she immediately threw it back. So Selena drank wine with pleasure in her homeland. Vars thought looking at the girl. On their first meeting, she said that what she liked most was wine from the La Fan province. It has low alcohol content, so she liked drinking it. Selena's glass was empty, and therefore Vars offered to pour more, to which she agreed, and pointed out that it was very tasty. While talking around the fire, the Archduke noticed that many small animals lived here. Squirrels or hedgehogs? Selena asked naively. And the man replied that there are hares and foxes here. "I need to prepare my bows." "You like to hunt?" he asked. But he didn't ask like that, but waited impatiently for her answer. Noticing his persistent gaze, Selena took it her own way and blushed slightly. Having already drunk the 3rd glass of whiskey, the girl thought that now was the time to kiss. The man's serious gaze and such an intimate atmosphere, this had never happened before. In fact, she wouldn't want to kiss for the first time when she is under the influence of alcohol. But there is nothing to be done. Marrying, the girl abruptly got up, remembering what they were talking about. But alcohol did its job, and while trying to answer that she had never been married, Selena staggered. She began to fall directly into Var's arms, feeling dizzy and the ground disappearing under her feet. The hands into which she fell were so large and cozy that the girl immediately relaxed in his arms. Vars took the inert girl in his arms and thought that she probably didn't tolerate alcohol very well, and she finds no other excuses for her behavior. Before the wedding, at first, and a week later, his wife's behavior varied greatly. He didn't understand who, how, or why, but Selena had definitely changed. As if she had turned into a witch, this thought was firmly rooted in his head. Several times he felt possessed when he was near her, and now, carrying the drunken girl in his arms to bed, Vars was even more convinced of this. If this girl is a witch, where is the real Selena? Will he be able to find her? The man sat on the bed, still holding the girl wrapped in his cloak in his arms. "It's cold," she said in her sleep, and she snuggled tighter against his broad chest. Although this was pleasant, the unexpected movement made Vars blush. He didn't understand where this feeling came from. She was wearing a vest and also her raincoat. She couldn't be cold. Angry at her unexpected reaction, he was indignant that she was a real witch. Vars didn't understand what this girl was doing to him, although she actually did nothing. It was already night outside, but she was calm, unlike Vars, who was indignant at the witch's cunning. The rest of the night passed quietly, and finally the first rays of the sun touched the ground. The Archduke sat on the bed, holding the girl wrapped in his cloak in his arms, completely ceasing to feel her body. All night he thought about what he should do if she really was a witch. An invincible, beautiful witch can devour an entire empire. What will happen then to a mere mortal like him? Better that woman, he decided, discarding the unpleasant memories. He still needs to find the real Selena. Hearing some sounds outside the window, Bar realized that Tart had finally arrived. The girl raised her head from the pillow, trying to open her eyes after a deep sleep. "I got out of bed and realized I was completely alone in the room. I fell asleep. Where did Vars go? He left me here," the girl thought in a panic. Leaving the room, she walked further into the house and heard someone speaking quietly. "Find out about the witches or shamans who were in the north before and after my wedding." Vars gave orders to the assistant Zart. The Archduke believes that the girl was swapped on the wedding day, and they need to find the real Selena. At such words, the girl felt indescribable horror, and although Yart assured the master that this could not happen, that there was absolutely no intrusion into the inner palace, Selena herself, eavesdropping from the corner, she began to get annoyed. Apparently, only her soul has changed, but not her body. If we find a witch, or a shaman who was in the north at that time, then it will not be difficult to find the real Selena. The Archduke continued to think. At that moment, Yart noticed the Archduchess standing at the bend and greeted her according to all the rules. Pretending she had just arrived, Selena came out to meet them. Vars introduced the young man as Viscount Sart Hein August and added that they would see each other often. And Sart himself replied that he was pleased to meet you. "Pleased to meet you. I hope we get along well," Selena replied politely. And although she said nothing unusual, the young men looked at each other suspiciously. In fact, Yart and Selena had already met in her hometown. Yart was the one who brought her. They also spoke several times in the palace, but now she acts as if she is seeing him for the first time. And the smiling Selena couldn't understand why the men were looking at her so strangely. When everything was ready, they all together started the journey back in the carriage. Sitting opposite the men, the girl thought that it seemed like everything was over for her. Recalling the reaction when she met Yart in the room, the girl realized that the real Selena already knew him. And now a strange atmosphere of distrust and misunderstanding has arisen between them. How serious can the charges against her for impersonating a duchess be? The death penalty is possible. Honestly, there is nothing strange in confusing a suddenly changed woman with a spy who is plotting some kind of grand conspiracy. And she will be brutally tortured to force her to tell the truth, and maybe even have her head cut off. He probably suspected her even when she brought someone she called her ex-lover. And now all that remains is to carry out the punishments for the committed crimes. It is really so difficult to lead a quiet family life and share different moments of everyday life. The girl cried mentally. No. Even if you find yourself in a tiger's den, you can get out alive and unharmed, she decided. So we must think about how she should behave. But for now, it is worth paying attention to the fact that she can endure everything. And although they rode in complete silence, Vars observed the behavior of the girl sitting opposite. He thought all witches were brave, but it seems this is not the case. Selena gained some kind of inspiration, or literally drowned in despair. In any case, she is amusing. Vars smiled to himself. The carriage moved slowly along the forest road, accompanied by a black crow. With its red eyes blinking, the bird took off and began a long journey. When it reached the village, it slipped through one of the attic windows. A long-haired young man was already waiting for him there. Sitting on his outstretched hand, the crow cawed something, and the young man thanked him for the information. But this man was not alone in the room, and another person asked how things were. More or less, replied the long-haired man, still holding the crow in his hand. The bandaged figure, hidden behind a thick cloak, replied that he hoped she would play her part well. The long-haired man was surprised that there was really nothing he could do now, and the bandaged man got angry, shouting that he understood everything. Rohan, a heavy hand fell on his shoulder, calming the furious man. This may be frustrating, but be patient. Vincent and I will take care of it. A third man entered the room. And it is still cold, he added, throwing a blanket over the shoulders of the bandaged man. Moving away from them, the long-haired man released his assistant. Bars thought he should first pretend that he knew nothing. It will be worse. She will understand everything and run away. There is no information about this new soul. So, if she simply escapes and returns to her former body, it will be impossible to find her. It seems we will have to abandon the idea of inciting her to escape and then locking her in a dungeon. Vars doesn't understand what her purpose is, but until he finds a way to retain the soul, she must forget about escaping. The only way to get what he wants is through polite cooperation. Whatever she thinks now, the real Selena was also a wonderful woman, but there is one big but that could ruin her life. Moments passed before Var's eyes as the girl looked at him with wide eyes, without a single hint of fear, while smiling beside him. And if it's not this soul looking at him, but her, we have to think of something, the Archduke decided confidently. What are the options? The young people, sitting opposite each other, were each thinking about their own problem. Suddenly, Selena realized that there seemed to be an option for her. Maybe she will convince Vars that his wife has not changed at all, and that he does not need to look for the real Selena. And if everything would be fine in this case, the girl sincerely hoped so. In both novels and dramas, there is always a magic method that everyone uses, and this method is called memory loss. The girl was greatly inspired by the idea that came to her. She had to act like a real actress, and then he believed her. Selena doesn't know when he started to suspect something, but she must be careful and say that she doesn't remember anything about their first night. The girl sat with full confidence that everything would go according to her plan, just as Vars was confident in his. Distracted from her thoughts, she looked out the window and realized that she had never seen the surroundings before. It seems to me that we are going another way. She asked Vars, to which he replied that the horses were different, and the road for the carriage needed another one, but that it wouldn't be much longer. Without hiding her suspicion, the young man kept watching the girl, waiting for what she would say next. "You're not hungry," he said with hope in his eyes. Vars remained silent, either not knowing what to answer or not wanting to answer her question. Trying to justify herself somehow, the girl added that they hadn't even had breakfast, so she wondered if they would be hungry. "The city is even further away, so we will have to wait," said Vars and offered his hands to Yard. At that moment, the knight handed the basket to the master, and Vars gave this basket to Selena, telling her she could eat it. Having accepted the basket with food, the girl smiled shyly, noticing that she wasn't worried about herself. But about him, the man did not expect this from a girl he considered a witch, and therefore he was very surprised. Confused, he replied that he was fine and that she shouldn't worry. After a while, the carriage passed through a rather large village. Selena looked out the window and admired the bright views. Vibrations of happiness literally emanated from her. She noticed that it was not like the square they were walking through. It was as if fairies lived here. Based on the girl's reaction, Bars thought she seemed to be seeing a city where people lived for the first time. Perhaps she is a witch who lived alone somewhere in the mountains. Anything is possible. Although the girl tried to pay attention to everything around her, without carefully looking at Vars, she felt his gaze. Why is he looking at her as if she were fake? Which makes her feel quite uncomfortable. "My butt already hurts from such a long carriage ride, but the horses' butts don't hurt from running so much," she snapped without thinking, to calm the situation. Immediately after uttering these words, the girl mentally became angry with herself. What was she talking about? Why would she further worsen the already awkward atmosphere? At that moment, the carriage suddenly braked and stopped. "We arrived where you said." Jart turned to the master. Selena was very happy with this stop and was waiting for the doors to open. Vars immediately got out of the carriage, without looking at the girl. Where is he? Is he really going to leave here and do business and send her alone to the palace? The girl became worried, But at that very moment, the man offered her his hand. "Get out," he said, with the intention of helping the lady down to the ground. Selina looked surprised at the large male palm that was only waiting for her. The young man blushed slightly as he offered her his hand and waited patiently for her to give him hers. The girl didn't think much and put her hand in the big one, accepting his help. After taking a couple of steps, she carefully descended to the ground, leaning on her husband. Bars noticed that if they drove further, she would be too hungry, so they would stop at a restaurant here. And turning, he walked to the side, lowering his hand, which surprised the girl. But she was not going to give up and, full of determination, did what she wanted. She went ahead with the intention of grabbing his hand. But since her hand was small compared to his large palm, she only grasped 2 of his fingers. Vars, of course, felt a touch on his hand and was very surprised. And the girl pretended that nothing supernatural had happened. She took his hand, thinking this was like a date and that they looked like real lovers. The restaurant they arrived at was richly decorated, and there were portraits of high-ranking people on the walls. The table was full of all kinds of food and drinks, served on rich plates. And the soup, bread, and main course. Everything was delicious. The girl devoured the food with great pleasure. But the gaze of the man, sitting opposite her, was too heavy. They were together all night, and he bought such delicious food, the girl thought sadly. Her mood started to deteriorate a bit, since not everything was going according to her plan. She thought that this way they would become at least a little closer, and she doesn't like having to deceive him that much, but she needs to try to survive. She must take care of her future self and do it right now, deciding to act as if she were Selina, who had lost her memory. That was her plan, and the girl said she had a question. "Who are we to each other?" She asked Vars directly, which surprised him greatly. The question was so strange that the man didn't understand why she was asking it. The girl cleared her throat, ready to perform the prepared scene in front of him. With an innocent look, she said that he came to her bedroom at night and gave her gifts. And most of all, she thought about the location of the bedroom because she felt they were a married couple. "Is that true?" she finally asked. Still not understanding what she meant, Vars took the cup with trembling hands and tried to drink tea from it. And Selina kept acting, adopting a completely innocent look. She added that she didn't understand what kind of relationship they had. Vars couldn't keep a calm face against his will. The tea came out of his mouth, and while the man was spitting, the girl was still looking at him with an innocent gaze. "I think you need to explain this in more detail," Vars added, starting to get irritated. "Sorry if I surprised you," the girl got scared. "In any case, it seems I have lost my memory," she added confidently, looking him straight in the eyes. And although such words surprised the Archduke, outwardly he tried not to reveal anything. If her witch nature was revealed, she wouldn't be able to achieve her goal. He thought she would start making excuses, but in any case, he was going to play along with her little act. And he said what she wanted to hear first of all: "They are spouses. Since when do you remember?" he asked, surprising the girl a bit. Starting to get nervous, the girl clenched her fists and tried to answer his question as realistically as possible. She doesn't know the exact date, but it was at night. He closed the curtains and told her to go to bed. An awkward pause loomed over them, but the man continued to drink tea while the girl awaited new developments. Then he added that the next day he went out for a while and immediately returned and spilled blood on the bed. "It turns out that up until this moment you remember nothing, I'm right?" asked Archduke Belias. And he added that the day she describes was their wedding day, which made her exclaim in surprise, covering her mouth with her hand. And the man asked if she probably wondered why there was nothing between them. And he immediately replied that their marriage was for convenience, watching with interest how she would develop such a story. This was a surprise for Selina. She hadn't thought it through. Vars decided to complicate her task and added that they decided to start their marital relationship 10 days after the ceremony. And of course, she doesn't remember it, but tomorrow is the 10th day. This is a failure. The girl sank, feeling like everything inside her had broken. Whatever they call it, she dug a hole for herself. She decided as they continued driving towards the restaurant. Selina is really going crazy. She knows what the monster Archduke is saying, but it's a blatant lie. If all this were true, what should she do? She didn't understand anything at all. Selina thought she had barely survived the most difficult moment, and then there was a new twist. Vars Velias continued to observe the girl's mental suffering. Why does she have no idea about this? If she is in the body of a married woman, she is really careless about everything. Is this really a shock for her? He thought cautiously, seeing her condition. In general, it's possible to show it so openly. The man started to get angry. How can she talk about marital duties and not even understand what they are? Like an innocent flower, she asked what happened between them. What a shameless and cunning witch. The young man decided to mark every centimeter of her body so that she could feel everything on her skin. The next night, everything went according to plan. Selena got ready for dinner. She had a big plan to conquer a man. Let's get drunk and warm up. That's exactly how her plan sounded. Yes, this is the worst option, but she can't think of anything else, so she has no other choice. It's just a way to buy time until she thinks of something better. But where can I get alcohol here? She doesn't know where a kitchen or a liquor store is. There was nothing to do, and Selena decided to go to the market, simply to buy alcohol, and return immediately. She is not running away and she will come back, so she is safe. The girl reassured herself. Passing by the hallway window, she noticed the view outside. The day will come when he and Bars get along, and then everything will be fine. For some time, the Archduke remained in his room, quietly rejoicing that everything was going according to his plan. He finally got what he wanted so much. The man held a red box in his hands. He barely managed to get a magical talisman that unites soul and body on the black market. This is an item that was originally used for medicinal purposes. It stores the soul, and it can heal wounds on the body. But due to side effects, only psychopaths suffer from them now. This small box contained something that had deadly side effects. This means that perhaps she will die faster than him, the owner of the talisman. But Vars will make sure that she doesn't die first, so that everything will be fine. He resolutely headed to the girl's room, surprised that not a sound could be heard from there. Perhaps she was sleeping and didn't notice that he had arrived. The man decided when no one answered the call. Vars called again, but the room was just as silent. At that moment, Anna approached with a cart full of food and was surprised to see the knight near the lady's door. The maid immediately felt that something out of the ordinary had happened. Now cordon off the territory, ordered the Archduke, and his appearance was terrible. The girl pulled a hood over her head to hide her face and carefully made her way through the crowd. But she still bumped into someone on the street. She apologized, but someone grabbed her hand, preventing her from falling. Once again, she apologized to this man and looked at his face, also hidden by the hood. Long purple hair peeked out from under the hood. The cloak concealed the tall male figure, and the gaze of the bright eyes pierced her. "I'm sorry, I was mistaken." The next moment, the hooded young man smiled and raised his hands in a conciliatory manner. Turning around, he left, leaving Selena bewildered. Taking care of him, the girl thought that this man was somewhat strange. The Archduke's personal guards searched the village streets in uniform formation. Seeing them, the people tried to hide and close all the windows and doors of their houses. The Archduke Belias himself was also with them. "Search everywhere," he ordered with a booming voice. "They will search until dawn, and in the morning, if necessary, they will start the process again." Selena ran away because she didn't want to be with him that much. "If you don't like it, then you can wait or say something. After all, I waited 10 days. She couldn't wait any longer. She decided that if he caught her, he would never let her go. Suddenly, in the distance, she saw a girl walking calmly, who was not even hiding or trying to escape. And although he wasn't sure if it was her, at that moment, a lock of blonde hair appeared under the hood. "It's her," Vars realized, and his heart sank. He ran as fast as he could to catch up with the fugitive, asking only one thing: that it's her he's looking for. Upon reaching her, he grabbed the girl's hand and looked her in the eyes. Vars expected the soul to still be in this body. To his surprise, Selena was a little frightened, and the hood fell off her head. By inertia, she pulled her hand back and asked Vars, who had grabbed her, what had happened. "I also noticed that she did not have a healthy complexion." The girl was really bothered by his appearance and extended her hand to see how he was. Seeing a palm approaching him, Vars unconsciously leaned towards her so that his palm rested on her cheek. "When I catch her, I'll lock her in the room. That's what I planned," the man thought, completely oblivious to what was happening around him. Although Selena was worried about him, so much tenderness in the middle of a crowded village made her feel embarrassed. Let's go. Yart was one of the first to notice this awkward scene and hurried to get rid of the indiscreet glances. He hoped the Duchess could hug the master tightly and suppress his murderous nature. Everything turned out this way, but there was one thing that bothered him, namely that she turned out to be not a simple girl, but an insidious witch. "What are you doing here?" After a moment, Vars regained his senses and remembered what was happening here. Selena was scared, not knowing how to explain the fact that she left the palace. But she still decided that there was no point in lying, and although it was awkward, she had to tell him everything as it was. I thought that alcohol would definitely be needed tonight, so I went to buy some. She snapped spiritedly. Alcohol Bars was immensely shocked by this turn of events. It was only because of alcohol that she snatched his soul, and because of this alcohol, she didn't sleep all night that time. A little disappointed, Wers noticed that she didn't seem to have drunk enough alcohol from the night before. This was news to the girl, wondering if she had gotten drunk, but the man added that it wasn't so bad, and that she shouldn't worry. The girl sincerely asked for forgiveness for her behavior, but the Archduke pointed out that this should not be done. Selina used to drink often and had no drinking habits. It seems her new body can't handle anything, and now she is very embarrassed. To make matters worse, she used the power of alcohol to postpone their night together. But now her plan has failed. Vars stared intently at the embarrassed girl and decided that now was the time for what he wanted to do. Kneeling in front of her, he greatly surprised Selina with his action. "Give me your leg." He patted her knee, signaling her to put her leg on it. The girl was indignant at the fact that he needed her leg. Is he really saying to put your foot on his knee like this, right on the street? Confused and not understanding what was happening, Selina was in no hurry to fulfill his request. But the man was still in front of her on one knee, patting the other, and she had no other choice, so she decided to just do it by closing her eyes. She took off her shoe and carefully raised her foot, intending to place it on the man's lap. But before she had time to do this, Vars grabbed her slender ankle with his powerful hand. For the next few seconds, he did something with her leg, leading the girl to increasing confusion. And soon, he let go of his hands, and an anklet with a small butterfly pendant was shining on her leg. Now Vars can breathe a sigh of relief, because if she runs away, he will always find her. Even if she cries and begs, he will never let her go. Vars noticed that her foot was much smaller than his palm, and the girl noticed that it was an anklet, really a gift. And she thanked him, saying she would gladly wear it. Selina was beaming with happiness, because the bracelet was very beautiful, and the sound it made when moving was cute. Shoes last time, an anklet, does he have a foot fetish? Selina was confused. The Archduke finally got up from his knees and looked at the girl. "Let's go home," the man said conciliatorily, and Selina happily agreed, smiling dazzlingly. But she was still tormented by the fact that she behaved badly when she was drunk. Vars noticed that he had never seen such drunken habits before, and warmly remembered how she clung to him. Therefore, from now on, she must never drink alcohol again when he is not around. And when he is near, is it possible? The girl asked mischievously, looking sideways, which Vars fell into a stupor for some time. But then, he simply smiled, realizing that she was joking. And he replied that if he is near, then, of course, it is possible, and everything is fine. "So today, we will have a drink." The girl was happy and inspired. The Archduke looked at Selina in silence, unable to object to her. In short, nothing happened yesterday. Selina sat sadly in her room the next day. Yesterday, as soon as they returned home, Vars immediately threw her into the bedroom. And Anna watched the door all night, so she wouldn't go anywhere. And then this morning came, which made her worry even more. It is certainly funny that she says such a thing after doing everything possible to avoid spending the night with him. But why doesn't he touch her? She was indignant that he dared to leave her like that. Looking in the mirror, the girl seemed to have no charm, but her face was so beautiful, a little sickly, as if there wasn't enough life. That face is not suitable for a strong leader, rather for an active and sweet person, for a charming and calm girl. Selina nervously drummed her finger on the table, lost in thought. Maybe she should try something completely new. Who knows, maybe if she seems very kind to him, then changes will occur in their relationship. And finally, they could kiss. The girl was very determined to achieve this. The window of the second floor of the palace suddenly opened. Letting in fresh air into the room, Vars went out onto the balcony and took a deep breath. He had finally finished all the documents. This yart was stuck here until lunch. He demanded that he review the report and then do the morning training, and even claimed that he needed to work even more at night. Lately, he had become bolder, and the Archduke was angry. But most of all, the man was interested in what Selina was doing now. The girl's room was located right above his office, and besides, it was almost lunchtime. If he is lucky, he will hear her laugh. Not so bad, the man thought with a smile on his lips. Some time later, Selina was having dinner in her room, and Anna wondered if the lady was happy with the food. And then she added that she had brought a man who wanted to meet her, and that this man was now right behind Anna. Stepping aside, the girl introduced herself as Mill August, from the August family, who has served the Archduke for many years. It is a great honor for her to meet the Duchess, the girl added with a smile. Anna continued to say that this lady had excellent manners and a strong will, and she brought her here because she thought she would be a good maid. Mina Methel herself added that she was initially appointed as a maid, but a few months ago, she suddenly became seriously ill and was on the verge of death. Selina could barely follow the thread of the girl's thoughts, who was chattering nonstop that fortunately she had met a wonderful doctor. She was able to survive all this, but she didn't manage to return to the palace in time. But she really wanted to meet the lady, so she asked if she could take the place of her personal maid right now. I am very glad to have been able to meet you. Methil finally finished with great enthusiasm. And although generally Selina was not against the maid, something still alarmed her. That cute girl she had been thinking about recently while looking at herself in the mirror. She looked suspiciously like Methil. Anna did not interfere in the conversation and just watched the girls silently. She noticed that the lady's expression was not very kind, but it was good that she agreed without saying anything. Selina has never asked for anything since she arrived at this palace. She never expressed discontent with the simple food and unfashionable clothes, never demanded that anything in this ruined palace be replaced. Only once did she ask to go out for a while. Of all the money they gave her, she only spent a few coins on small things. Looking at her, one can say that she has no hidden motives. It is difficult in real life to be as naive and pure as this girl seems to be. Perhaps the Empress will come here tomorrow. It seems the knight thought he had married quietly, simply informing the Emperor in writing. The Empress who is playing with the Emperor cannot fail to know about it. In the Empress's life, there was no need to hide her emotions. She is the most respected woman in this country. However, if an illegitimate woman becomes a noble lady, in addition to being the wife of her only brother, the consequences are unpredictable. Anna had a strange and depressing premonition. She could not predict what would happen next. Of course, she loves and appreciates the Empress more than anything in the world. But this does not mean that she is attentive to others and only says nice things. She is not the type to mock and dismiss someone if she doesn't like them. And yet, Anna hopes that whatever this innocent girl hears will not harm her. Anna was actually worried, just like Selina herself, but the girls had different reasons to worry. Methil gracefully served tea into a cup, showing all her skills. "Your Highness, did you like it?" she asked with a dazzling smile. The lady was still impressed by the active and sweet maid, but replied affirmatively. "She simply shines." She would look great with Vars, Selina thought sadly. Vars Velias calmed down and headed towards his wife. Without saying a word, he sat down at the table opposite the girl to also have tea. However, Methil, upon seeing the knight, immediately shuddered slightly, as if she were scared. Selina noticed how the girl was serving tea for the Archduke, and her hands were trembling slightly. She realized the maid was nervous, and that was understandable. Anyone would get nervous when such a handsome man appeared in front of her. Selina herself is like that. Well, she felt like an idiot, and therefore her mood somehow dropped immediately. Even if you practice your charm, the person inside still won't change. She clenched the fabric of her skirt helplessly. The girl's bad mood did not go unnoticed by Vars. He instructed the maid to leave them, and Mile didn't have to ask for long after bowing quickly. She instantly disappeared from sight. Trying to escape quickly, the girl didn't stop until she entered her room, and slamming the door shut. She was very, very, very scared, almost burst into tears there. It was so scary that her hands were shaking, and she was even more nervous because she could make a mistake at any moment and be punished. But the Duchess is truly amazing. Even in front of Her Highness, she remained absolutely calm. And Methil even said that her tea was very tasty, nothing like reality. The personal maid literally prayed and worshipped the Archduchess. She was like a deity to her. And Methil swore that she would endure and never lose to the Duke, that she would become the best maid worthy of an Archduchess. However, in reality, Selina didn't feel like such a strong woman. Her mood was worse than ever. Vars watched his wife and noticed so many different expressions on her face in such a short time. She really is a very interesting and sweet person. The man looked thoughtfully at his wife, clearly thinking about something. "How about we have dinner together?" he suggested after thinking for a while. And Selina immediately agreed, literally beaming with happiness. And her joy was transmitted to Vars, poking him right in the heart. If he had offered to take a walk and drink champagne, perhaps she wouldn't have refused. And while Vars experienced moments of joy due to their upcoming dinner, Selina's mood remained just as gloomy. Calm down, the girl told herself mentally. She was jealous of Mezel because she wanted Vars to pay attention only to her. They were already married and had lived together for 2 days and 1 night. She had already done everything she could in her current situation, and now she wants to spend even more time with him. Thinking this, she jumped excitedly from her seat, surprising the Duke. Selene decided that she should be more assertive and asked to be given a tour of the outside palace. Her mood clearly improved. She looked like a warrior, which did not escape Vars's gaze. But the silence between them seemed like an eternity. The girl awaited a response to her proposal. "Okay," replied Vars Velias, and a barely perceptible smile of satisfaction appeared on his lips. The girl immediately got up from her seat, intending to fulfill her promise. The Archduke extended his folded hand for the girl to take. "Let's go." The man leaned slightly towards her, taking a couple of steps towards her. At first, Selina looked surprised at the offered hand, but this did not last long. Soon the girl extended her hand to him, and they embarked on an impromptu excursion. It was a sunny day, and the nature around us seemed to be blooming. Selina walked, holding tightly to Vars's hand, walking measuredly with him. But the young couple felt some discomfort between them. However, the man was thinking about something completely different. It seemed to him that everything here was too gloomy, and that she might not like it. However, the girl noticed a building in the distance and asked what was there. The Duke replied that this building was rarely used, only when guests arrived, or a reception was organized, and now it was a bit empty. "Ha ha, that's right." Selina took this opportunity and pushed the man straight towards that building. Vars immediately realized that she was trying to quietly drag him into that building, but he didn't understand why she needed this. How can a girl who looks like a bunny have so much power? But submitting even to such a small force wasn't so bad. Did she decide? "You say there is no one there." Selina spoke very seriously. "If it's really like that, there is a suitable atmosphere and luck smiles upon her. Her little dream will finally come true, and they will be able to kiss for the first time, but she is getting ahead of the event too much." Deciding to calm down a little, the girl thought that she first needed to go to this building. As the young couple headed towards the doors, someone was watching them. The interior was truly gloomy, with a huge staircase, wide corridors, and a complete lack of light. Without letting go of Vars's hand, Selina looked around in surprise. "It's really quiet here," the girl noted. She took a couple of steps forward. She stopped, frightened, and thought she heard something. "I think I hear Nefis's voice," Vars said thoughtfully. Selina, a little scared, asked who that was. He explained to her that it was the ghost of a girl who lives on the 4th floor here. "Why did you tell me that just now?" Selina shouted in fear. However, the Duke didn't understand what she was talking about, so the girl excitedly repeated that she meant a ghost. Continuing in amazement, the Archduke noticed that somehow this did not particularly bother him, and he didn't believe that there were people in the world who were afraid of ghosts. As if realizing they were talking about her, Nefis at that moment peeked out from behind a pillar on the 2nd floor. Naturally, Selina immediately saw her and became seriously scared. "Let's get out of here quickly." She pushed Vars towards the exit fearfully. Moving her legs more frequently, the girl urged Vars to leave and asked him to hurry. If you think about it, in this world there really is magic and dragons, and of course, there are ghosts. She used to be very afraid of ghosts, but she forced herself to think that none of it was true. "This won't work here," the girl thought tearfully. She was offended that Vars treated her too cruelly, ignoring other people's fears. After all, even if he is not interested in her, even if he doesn't care. It's somehow sad. When they left the gloomy building, the door at the other end of the courtyard was open. Awaiting the passing of a carriage, to Vars's surprise, 4 harnessed horses entered the palace grounds, carrying a richly decorated carriage. However, he was worried about who was patrolling outside at that moment. Although all his boys were even too diligent, the carriage stopped right in front of them, to Vars's surprise. The doors opened, and a tall, beautiful woman with dark hair dressed in rich clothes stepped out. "Long time no see, little brother," she said, looking at Vars. "That's for sure," Archduke Velias replied emotionlessly. The relatives exchanged greetings, while Selina looked at the arriving guest in surprise. The beautiful woman noticed that her brother had recently married, but Vars rudely replied that it was none of her business, and he tried to cover Selina with himself. This move did not escape the woman's gaze, who was very perceptive. Although she was very beautiful, the look in her bright red eyes was a little alarming. After a while, the woman stood by the lit fireplace thinking about something. "Why are you here?" Vars burst into the room, to which she replied that she didn't need any reason to come to her father's house. But Vars was not satisfied with this answer, because even if that were the case, coming without any reason is too much. Having no intention of continuing this dispute, the woman added that on the way she received news that Vars was looking for a witch. That's not true, the irritated Archduke replied instantly. His sister offered to help him with this, but he refused without a moment's hesitation. It seems you have a good relationship with your wife, the guest continued. You are a family now, so you need to get used to each other. But Vars rudely replied that it was none of his business. But the woman was not going to end the conversation, and added that they needed to get to know each other so as not to accidentally pull the hair of someone who shouldn't be. The Archduke warned her not to even think about any nonsense if she didn't want the imperial palace to drown in a sea of fire. The brother and sister were stubborn and impenetrable. Neither wanted to give way to the other. And yet, the guest exhaled tiredly and gave up for a moment. It seems you have already forgotten about the battlefield and are living your life, she pointed out. And she added that she was very happy about this. Glad that her brother had finally found his place, Vars walked nervously and quickly down the corridor. All witches are so arrogant and insidious that they can manipulate you into complete submission. Both the imperial palace and the ghosts do whatever they want. And this bothers her a lot. Walking down the corridor, she couldn't calm down and got increasingly irritated. But if you think about it, there really are witches who fear ghosts. Witches usually use them as familiars. There must be other clues for Selina's search. Witches rarely fear ghosts. Usually, when a witch takes a body, the soul of the original owner is destroyed or trapped. A witch with such an innocent appearance simply cannot commit such atrocities. Several thoughts spun in the man's head. He didn't know what to do right, but he still decisively decided to put an end to this matter so that the original owner of the body could never return to it. The next morning, Selina lay in bed newly awakened. She slept well and immediately became interested in whether Vars had woken up. They needed to have breakfast together. Looking around, she realized that Vars Velias, her husband, was there. In the room, frightened, she immediately dived under the blanket, hoping he hadn't noticed her. How could he be there? She really saw everything. She had just woken up and probably had a very puffy face. And even her mouth was so wide open, yawning. She didn't even want to think about how she looked now. But at that moment, the man approached the bed and apologized embarrassedly. He didn't want to scare her. The girl looked out from under the blanket and asked if anything had happened earlier in the morning. Vars didn't know where to start because something really happened. To be honest, a very dangerous witch has arrived in Abelia's, and we can say that she is targeting Selina. But she is just an innocent bunny who is afraid of even ghosts and finds out the whole truth. She will faint. His sister is different from other witches, so she could swallow this girl without even blinking. Vars contacted the imperial palace to have her taken away. But in the meantime, we must be on guard. What intention did she have of staying here until now? He wondered, looking at the girl hidden under the blanket again. Selina threw off the blanket with a battle cry, greatly surprising Vars. Still trembling with fear, she apologized and explained that she was a little surprised by his appearance. The man added that he didn't want to scare her, but that she should know. Neffy's disappeared after they went there yesterday. Perhaps she liked Selina. The girl didn't understand how the ghost disappeared and how much she liked her. Sitting on the edge of the bed, Bar explained that there is a maid who looks after Neffy's, but they say she disappeared at dawn. She often takes advantage of girls who are alone and tries to steal their bodies in fact. His words were an absolute lie, but Selina didn't know this, and therefore sincerely got scared and hid under the blanket again. What are you doing? Vars asked, surprised. Nothing. So you're saying it would be better for me not to be alone? Asked Selina, trembling under the blanket. And Vars confirmed it, looking surprised at the finely trembling Selina. Oh, what's out there? He suddenly said, pointing out the window, which made Selina jump in fear again. What is it? She shouted, clinging to Vars. If I could, I would like to see something like this every day, the Archduke thought with a smile. Listen, he gently touched his wife, intending to calm her down. But at that moment, Methil knocked on the door, and then the personal maid entered with a cart, intending to help the lady get ready. Selina, still covered by the blanket, jumped out of bed and thanked the girl for her help. But Bars didn't really like this, because there had just been such a pleasant atmosphere. How could such an indiscreet girl be the Archduchess's maid? And why was Selina so happy to meet her? He would have replaced her immediately if she hadn't been with Jard's sister. While helping Selena, Methil, of course, noticed the Duke sitting on the bed and felt indescribable horror. A couple of days earlier, her brother left her some survival instructions if the knight is in a bad mood. So, she definitely needs to stay close to His Highness. This will save her life, Jart said conspiratorially. Methil promised to remember everything, although it was a bit scary. And now she remembered her brother and sank a little, which Selena noticed immediately. But the maid couldn't tell the lady anything, and just continued helping her with trembling hands. The clouds over Varsvelia's also continued to thicken, and his gaze turned monstrous. But then Selena remembered that she would like to have breakfast together this afternoon. "Will you wait?" she asked with a smile, turning to her husband. Instantly, the clouds over the man opened up, and like a tender and cozy bear, he agreed. Even the atmosphere in the room became lighter, not counting Methil, who was hiding fearfully behind her mistress. Having finished helping Selena, the girl left the room and leaned tiredly against the door. Her brother was right. If she is next to His Majesty, then she will be safe, keep it up. Having changed clothes, Selena, accompanied by Vars, headed for the exit. Walking down the open corridor, she realized that it was definitely warmer than when she first arrived here. Spring has finally arrived, the girl smiled warmly. Vars was interested in what she saw and why she was laughing. "There is a white butterfly," the girl pointed her finger towards the street. And she added that they looked like her. Vars was very surprised. "To get honey, the butterfly needs to find a flower, but there are no flowers here. It has no safe haven, and no one to take care of it. And when the wind blows, it is difficult for her, but she bravely flies forward." And bravery, Selena thought when she saw it fly in search of flowers. Hearing the girl's reasoning, the Duke began to look gloomier. "She speaks as if she is about to leave this place. Does this mean that she is just using him and planning to leave him?" "I can do this," he said, placing his hand on the girl's shoulder. "He can give her a safe home and take care of her. He really can do this for her." Vars felt with all his soul that he was ready to take care of her for his whole life. The frank words she uttered also impressed Selena, and although the Archduke spoke sincerely, she thought that not even in her dreams should she dare to leave him and fly away like a butterfly. Flowers, honey, whatever it is, let her say what she needs, and he will get it by any means necessary. Although Vars said such nice words to her, the man looked very frightening. Selena was startled to realize that he was angry and scared. His words really sounded as if he was complaining about the danger. So he says everything through gritted teeth. She wants to improve their relationship, even if it takes a long time, and if she can't, she at least wants to be a good friend. "Maybe we can go out together," the girl asked pleadingly and confidently at the same time. Such frankness surprised Vars, who did not expect the girl to still treat him with such warmth. And although he really wanted to, he felt ashamed and wasn't sure it was possible. After all, his sister is just waiting for the opportunity to get to know her better, and maybe even do something with his wife. His crazy sister would never come here like this. On the one hand, he would like to lock up Selena and ensure they never met, but he literally sees everything she is thinking about. How does she want to go on a date with him? But for some reason, he doesn't answer. It would be great to go for a walk together. But why is he silent and all that? "Is there anywhere you want to go?" the man finally asked, extending his hand to her. "To the market," the girl replied without hesitation, placing her big palm on his. After all, at the market, you can see all kinds of things and eat various snacks. However, Vars was worried that if she heard rumors about him and knew the whole truth, she would also smile and take his hand. He, hesitatingly, squeezed her small fingers in his hand. Then he grabbed her whole palm, intending never to let go. Vars added that he wanted to tell her something, specifically that the woman who met them yesterday was his sister. These words surprised the girl, because it wasn't like that in the original. But why didn't he introduce her yesterday? It turns out she ignored her sister-in-law. This is the worst first impression you could give your in-laws. At that moment, Vars asked if she had regained her memory, and the girl answered instantly, and immediately, that she hadn't done so yet. Then there's no need to rush, the man finished, leading her with him. Soon they opened the door, intending to go to the market. But an unpleasant surprise awaited them there. "You have finally arrived," his sister Barca was waiting for them. Selena felt this was her chance to change the first impression she had of herself, and she intended to introduce herself. However, Barca stopped right in front of her, protecting the girl from her sister. For some time, there was a battle of opinions between them. Neither of the relatives wanted to give way to the other. But this did not stop Selena, and peeking out from behind Vars, she greeted her sister. and introduced herself as the wife of Archduke Vars Velias, Selina Velias. I just found out that her older sister came here. I'm very happy we met. The girl mumbled and expressed the hope that they would get along well in the future. Cynthia Velias really liked the frankness of this girl her brother had married. Addressing her brother, she repeated that Selina wants to get along with her, and it seems he is the one holding back. I am also happy to meet Selina, the woman said, and asked how about having dinner together today. This is impossible, Vars said bluntly. However, Selina took his hand and apologized to her sister in a softer tone, since they already had something planned. If everything is in order, how about tomorrow? She asked, still intending to get to know her husband's relatives better. Vars really didn't like this, but looking at the girl, he realized he couldn't refuse her. The guest also noticed that although the brother didn't want this, he couldn't even open his mouth in front of his wife. So she found the one she needed. The woman thought and replied that it was a good idea. The Belias Palace was built to block the passage of monsters descending from the permafrost mountains of the north. Over time, there were fewer monsters, and the palace began to fill with people. The Duke allowed them to settle here and provided passive assistance. When word spread that the ruler of the local lands took good care of the inhabitants, people who found it difficult to make a living began to arrive here from all over the empire. The opening of the mine allowed the life of a rapidly growing population in the north to be sustained. A large number of magical ore deposits formed, which appear when dragon skeletons lie there for a long time, so there were no special difficulties. Thus arose the mining and manufacturing industries, which over time managed to accumulate wealth from other sources, like monster hide, which is worth a lot of money. Thus, 200 years later, the young lady made her debut. At the advanced age of 27, Cynthia Bellias made her debut at the Imperial Palace. The beautiful girl was very popular among young people, a northern witch who instantly captured the minds of people in the Imperial Palace. Shortly after her arrival there, the territory of Belias became a duchy. When the mandatory restrictions on tributes and troops were lifted, the Duchy of Belias became so large that no one could surpass it. Selina read all this in a book taken from the palace library, and it impressed her greatly. Brother and sister work hard both inside and outside the duchy, and together they have raised the status of the country. Although they spoke in a cold tone, there was no feeling of enmity between them. Selina thought that this was the real family she had never had. Someone suddenly called the girl, and she turned in that direction. Methil walked towards her and asked if she had gone for a walk and where the rest of the maids were with her. There was a young man. The maid happily introduced the young man as the doctor who helped her when she was on the verge of death, and simply an amazing person. The young man bowed gallantly and noted that he was happy to meet your highness. I hope we get along well. His violet eyes looked directly at Selina. There was nothing unusual in his behavior, and Selina ceremoniously continued the conversation. But something surprised her. He seemed familiar. She froze, unable to say a word, and the young man asked if she wanted to say something. Laughing awkwardly, she replied that it was nothing, and she simply misidentified him. Your Highness, what are you planning to do next? Metal asked, while the stranger behind her simply smiled calmly. However, in the next moment, when Selina wasn't looking, the young man's gaze sharpened. Selina told Metal her plans for the day, and the maid asked, horrified, if she and the knight were going to the market together. Yes, the girl replied, beaming with happiness, very satisfied with the upcoming trip. After a while, she walked arm in arm with Vars towards the entrance of the village. The girl now seemed to shine inside. Her mood was very good. Let's buy some treats and eat by the fountain, she suggested, turning to her husband. Vars said nothing in response and just nodded affirmatively. Clutching the man's hand, the girl went ahead with a calm soul. Initially, this was not in her power, but now he follows her wherever she wants. Selina was simply delighted. Soon they approached the market square, where many people were busy with their business. But as soon as they entered the square, it seemed that the roar of the town quieted down a little, and all eyes turned towards them. Vars knew this would happen. He had been through a lot for a long time. Such a hostile atmosphere must confuse Selina. The man regretted being so crazy that he allowed this to happen. But the girl only squeezed his hand tighter, distracting him from his dark thoughts. What kind of snacks do you like? She smiled cheerfully as she asked the question. What? Maybe apples. She asked again, but the man didn't answer. The Archduke was still annoyed by the neighbor's reaction to his appearance. But Selina by his side didn't allow him to get angry. I love apples. She realized that she really likes them. Then the girl dragged him to the counter and offered to buy some apples first. Her joy somehow rubbed off on him, and Vars couldn't pay attention to anything other than his wife. Although Selena tried her best to remain cheerful, she was struck by what was happening around her. It's not even anger that caused such a sad feeling in the air. Everyone here looks at Vars with fear in their eyes. They are afraid of the person who will protect them if they get into trouble. This brings so much loneliness that it's no wonder the husband feels truly lonely. So she squeezed her husband's hand even tighter, thus showing him her support. After buying the apples, they sat by the fountain in the middle of the market square. When the man was about to start eating the apples, Selena snatched them from his hands and asked him to wait. She took out a handkerchief and very carefully wiped the apple. This action greatly surprised Vars. He didn't understand why they had to clean the apple. The diligence with which she did it made him laugh a little. His smile did not escape the girl's gaze, who was very happy about it. Still, a smile suits the Archduke well, and this made her soul become so light. Returning the peeled apple to him, the girl added that if you do it like this, it will taste better. And since you can only eat a certain amount of apples a day, it's better to eat the most delicious ones. Vars looked surprised at the shiny apple in his hands while the girl peeled hers. Then he looked up at the bright sky and felt an unusual sensation inside him. This must be the feeling of happiness itself. Soon a crunch was heard, and each of the young people started eating their own apple. However, the girl was not entirely calm and tenaciously followed the reaction of the man sitting next to her. It's possible now, she wondered mentally. Yes, now or never, she was determined. Vars noticed the girl's unusual behavior, so he looked at her inquiringly. At that moment, Selena turned to him and winked playfully. By such an unexpected action, the man literally choked on the apple and coughed. "Are you okay?" The girl patted him hard on the back while the man bent over. He didn't understand what he had just seen with his own eyes. If he wasn't imagining it, then Selena winked at him. If a girl winks, it means she is showing interest. It's as if my subordinates squint to attract girls' attention. He suddenly compared, but it was not followed by a cruel failure in the seduction attempt. "This happened to me," the Archduke was prostrated. He abruptly turned to her, wanting to make sure his vision hadn't deceived him. But Selena had already moved away from him, ashamed of what she had done. And while the man tried to figure out if she really did it or just imagined it, the girl tried not to look at him. But she ran out of patience, and Vars asked her directly what she had just done. Such pressure took Selena by surprise. She couldn't find what to say, thoughts spun in her head. She didn't understand what to do, and the first thing that came to her mind was to answer that her stomach hurt. But she immediately thought that if she felt bad, Vars would most likely worry. And she quickly started babbling that this was not what she meant. The apple was so delicious that for a second she thought her stomach hurt. And she laughed nervously, blushing like a tomato. She reproached herself for what she did. If she had really gone crazy, why did she do this? But she couldn't tell the truth. Judging by his reaction, he was not happy. The Archduke at that moment considered himself a complete idiot who couldn't even figure out what was going on. How absurd. They sat there, blushing, feeling the awkward pause between them. And yet she is so cute, he thought, while Selena thought he was cool. After going to the market, Selena Velias found herself bathing in her room. Submerged in the water, she thought that Vars was a fool. She didn't have a grimace of pain on her face. So, why was he so easy to convince? And how could someone not understand what a wink meant? He probably just wanted to turn away and pretend he didn't notice her wink. But it would be better for him to just be a fool who didn't notice anything. And if Vars pretends not to notice, then her cuteness just stinks. Everything is very sad. While sitting in the bath, Selena suddenly felt a cold breeze. And she immediately remembered Vars's words that the ghost often hunts girls who are alone and tries to steal their bodies. She instantly jumped out of the bath frightened. Since entry to the inner palace is now restricted, only 5 people can enter now and leave here freely. Several maids arrive at dawn under Anna's direction to work and then leave. Anna is busy with dinner now. Methil should have finished. Yart simply cannot come here because he is busy with work and has no right to enter the ladies' room. In the evening silence of the palace, a heart-wrenching and frightened scream was heard. "I am alone now," Selena thought with horror, instantly wrapping herself in a towel. Not knowing the way, she ran out of the room. Vars warned her not to be alone, but she forgot. The girl ran away, calling herself foolish and idiotic. And now, at the end of the corridor, Vars's room was visible, and she only prayed that he was in the room without thinking for a second. The girl threw only a light cloak over the towel and burst into the room without knocking. In front of her was Varsvelias, who was preparing to go to bed, so he was undressed. Selina felt relieved to see him right in front of her, but the man was quite surprised. There were tears in the girl's eyes, and she could barely hold back the sobs that burst out. Still, seeing his wife on the verge of tears made Vars worry about what had happened to her. The fire crackled cheerfully in the fireplace, devouring the carefully placed firewood. Bars was sitting on the floor next to his own bed, while Selina, wrapped in a blanket, sat on the bed and warmed herself by the fireplace. They literally forced him to get out of bed, and now he was lost wondering what had happened. The girl was still scared, so she carefully slid onto the floor with the blanket and sat down next to the Archduke. Moreover, the tearful girl also clung to him, seeking protection and comfort. Vars, who did not expect such a reaction, looked at her more closely. What he saw surprised him. Selina's hair was wet. Water droplets covered her body, barely covered with clothing, and the light raincoat didn't even cover my bare knees. Realizing all this, Varsvelias blushed with shame and understanding that her clothes were so fine, and that under the cloak, nothing desirable to see was visible. But these thoughts made him blush even more. But if he asks her what she is wearing under the cloak, she will take him for crazy. Even he hears that response. The Archduke exhaled calmly, trying to calm his racing heart. "What were you doing?" he asked the girl in a calm tone. Then Selina, wrapped in a cloak, replied that she was just washing up. So it is, as if nothing supernatural happened," Vars replied, but emotions raged in his soul. He wondered why she came to him like that, and wants to ask her so many things, like why she was crying. But if he asks her anything, she will leave immediately, and he doesn't want that. When the girl's emotions subsided a little, she leaned tiredly on the strong man's shoulder. Covering her mouth, the girl yawned. The incident in the bathroom made her quite nervous. But Vars liked this turn of events. She cried so much that she was now completely exhausted. He gave her the bed so she could sleep a little. "So why are you nearby?" he asked, turning to the girl. But when she asked him in surprise what he had said, the man explained to her. He added that she was still wearing only a thin cloak. The girl looked at him bewildered, and then the meaning of the words spoken reached her, and she was horrified. In fact, she ran out of the room literally in what her mother gave birth in. There was nothing under her clothes. And she completely forgot about it, but he really noticed. And if he thinks she is a pervert, what a shame. Bars got up from his seat, and the girl thought that he had realized how she had disgraced herself. But the man simply went to the fireplace and added more wood to warm himself up. And then he returned to the spot next to her, which greatly pleased the girl, as she thought he hadn't noticed anything. The man closed his eyes exhaustedly, thinking that she had come up with something again. And now she was sitting there smiling. His heart sank seeing her tears, but if she continues smiling like this, he will want to make her cry so that she clings to him so touchingly. What is he thinking about? Bars was horrified by his own thoughts. Each of those sitting on the floor in front of the fireplace at that moment only thought that the other would not recognize their most intimate thoughts. The next morning was no less sunny than the previous one. Outside the window, birds sang cheerfully, awakened by the arrival of spring. Yart politely knocked on the master's room and asked permission to enter. No sound was heard in the room, and the knight himself opened the door, eager to discuss business. But he immediately stopped dead, noticing the long blonde hair on the knight's bed. This sight slightly surprised the Archduke's assistant, and he froze in place. Then he hurried to close the door and backed away, as if he had seen something he shouldn't have seen. Sitting on the floor of the hallway, the knight slowly realized what had just happened. At that moment, the room door opened slightly, and Archduke Velias appeared through a small gap. Asking what he wanted, Vars left the room, and Yart continued with his report that it seemed there was a witch living in the north at that moment. And it wouldn't be easy, because the witches were informed that if their true identity was revealed, they would be in trouble. But now they are looking at her. He took the documents the assistant had brought and began to study them closely. They said several merchants saw a witch near the south wall about 15 days ago, with the entire body, face, head, and even fingers carefully bandaged. And after the Archduke's wedding, she disappeared without a trace. Among witches, there are sometimes those who dream of eternal life. It is possible to find a living body that has given up the rotten body. It is even better if the body wasn't their target from the beginning. They won't try to go back. Find her no matter how difficult it is, ordered Duke Belias. And he ordered them to find her weak spot, whether it was a dying body or a relative she was hiding. No matter how cowardly he behaved, if only he could keep Selina close to him. No matter what her background is, what goals she pursues if she wants to leave him, then he needs to know her weakness so he can at least seize that opportunity. Yart, of course, accepted the order, although he didn't understand the logic of his master's reasoning. To be frank, it seemed to him that Archduke Belias had gone crazy from his love. If everything will be fine, maybe we should escort her the whole full moon night. Everything would turn out fine. Mrs. Selina seems like a piece of fluff that would fly away if you blew on her, and Yard is not sure he can guarantee her safety. Maybe it would be worth taking her out of the palace, but this thought was immediately dismissed. Because the big, scary bear would, of course, be looking for his bunny. Of course, this is not an option, then the Duke will usually get furious. And if His Highness could appease him, I would like her to be closer. But this scenario is one of the most dangerous, so only praying remains. After hearing the assistant's report, Bars returned to his room and leaned heavily against the door. Thoughts were running through his head, but they all revolved around one person, about a small, fragile girl sleeping peacefully in his bed. No matter how much he looked at her, she remained beautiful. How good that she is sleeping so deeply, the man thought as he approached her. The girl's legs moved slightly under the blanket, opening even wider. This made the man close his eyes, thinking she wasn't wearing clothes. In general, Bars thought she was one of the shy ones, but how could she sleep in such a helpless state? It is true that the man started getting angry at her naivety, while the girl slept peacefully by his bed. If she catches a cold from the cold, she is so thin, Vars fumed, throwing several blankets on her one by one. In the end, Selina found herself literally buried under a pile of warm blankets. But she continued to sleep peacefully. And Vars, with a sense of accomplishment, decided that he needed to wash up and regain his senses. But as soon as he left the room, Selina instantly opened her eyes. He really went to wash up, he just left, the girl was surprised. In fact, she had a light sleep due to the ghost, and when the door opened, she woke up. And she stayed there motionless. And then Vars drilled her with his terrible gaze. They haven't even kissed yet. Isn't he getting too ahead of himself? In fact, Selina could hardly say this to his face. And it's good that she didn't say it. Otherwise, she would have disgraced herself for all time. Turning around, the girl decided to simply pretend to be asleep. But she shouldn't get angry when someone flirts with her, and not the other way around. And I suddenly remembered the reason why I came to my husband's room in the first place. She got out of bed with the blanket and headed towards the bathroom door. And she sat down next to him, justifying herself by saying that there was a ghost there. If Neffys appears now, she will immediately start pulling the door handle. Trying to put her thoughts in order, Belias took a shower. But my thoughts didn't want to organize, they jumped from one to another. If a person has as much experience as him, he will be able to feel the presence of someone outside the building. And now, while showering, he felt that someone was right outside the bathroom door. He could almost see her silhouette sitting on the floor by the door. As he knows it, not even a cold shower calms him down. After having been under the stream of water for a long time, he still felt that she was also behind the door, trying to kill him. What kind of torture was this? He remembered that she, like a bunny, said she was afraid of a ghost. Indeed, at that moment she looked very sweet, with her thin and restless voice. If he opens the door, he will meet Selina, he thought as he put on his bathrobe after the shower. Seeing each other in robes, they really look like husband and wife. The door opened so suddenly that Selina was scared and happy at the same time. Tears immediately appeared in her eyes. The girl was truly frightened. She sat on the floor, huddled under the blanket, trembling, as Bar stood over her like a huge statue. From his height, she looked like a small bean. After changing and getting ready, the girl sat in the lounge drinking tea. She thought with horror that she could no longer live like this. If she is afraid during the day, she can go out. The outer walls are full of people. But at night, she stays alone with her fear and can only tremble, hiding in the pillow. All this horror experienced at night made my mood get lower and lower. Anna noticed that something was bothering the lady and asked her directly about it. Although Selina was ashamed to talk about it, she still said that she was very afraid of ghosts. She also heard about Neffys, who lives in the palace, and that if she is alone, Neffys will come to take over her body. That's what worries her. Anna listened attentively to the lady, and then said that Neffys is a spirit that belongs to the owner. It knows etiquette, respects the living, and faithfully serves the Archduke's family. So the lady has nothing to worry about. Ghosts strictly protect their territory, the entire palace, including the interior. And the exterior, it is Neffys' territory, so other ghosts cannot appear here without her permission. So don't be afraid, Anna finished, which greatly irritated Selena. She also remembered Vars's words, that he didn't believe there were people in the world who were just afraid. And now everything became clear to me. The ghost here and the vengeful spirit she was thinking about are two different spirits. And Anna added that Nefis is very kind and a little shy. If she knew that the mistress was afraid of her, she wouldn't have approached this. A pale and friendly ghost immediately appeared in Selena's imagination. Greeting her cheerfully, she exhaled with some relief, imagining that the ghosts there were like pets. And she realized that she was not afraid now. But at the same time, another thought occurred to her. The way she quickly escaped from that empty building and rushed Vars to go with her. And how she burst into his room last night, fleeing from a ghost. How funny everything must have looked from the outside. The Duke probably almost died laughing seeing her horror. It turns out he knew everything about you, but pretended not to understand it. The girl realized it. Selena was overwhelmed by so many different feelings. Resentment, anger, and frustration. She felt like a rude fool, and she decided to fix it soon. But there is no time yet, because she wants to look beautiful while having dinner with Vars's sister. She decided she would deal with it later, and asked Anna to help her get ready. As the sun was setting, it painted everything around her with a soft, golden light. Cynthia Bellias was waiting for her guests to arrive in her room. Vars and Selena did not have to wait long, and the girl greeted them friendly, and asked them how long they had been waiting. Not at all, Cynthia replied, getting up from her chair. Selena joyfully noticed that the woman's smile was exactly the same as Vars's. Talking a little, she said she was very happy to be able to see the sky and the stars, and that the breeze was so fresh. Vars decided not to get involved in this small talk, but Selena decided the opposite. She elbowed her husband in the side with all her might so that he would also join the conversation. The man looked inquisitively at his wife. Her appearance was very unfriendly, because the girl hadn't forgiven him for the joke about the ghost yet. She now understood that he wouldn't cause her any harm. Everyone went to the dining room for dinner, and Selena said she saw a butterfly the other day, so she thinks everything will bloom soon. It's very cold in the north even in summer, she asked, smiling. Cynthia didn't really continue the conversation, but she was surprised by her brother's wife's behavior. Usually, the noble ladies she met told her different things when they met. She didn't always maintain the conversation, because she wasn't interested in them. But most women are afraid to die, and therefore barely open their mouths. Sometimes, those who stayed for a long time and were friendly turned out to be flatterers. This girl doesn't give that impression. Is she stupid, naive, or just so pure? The woman wondered. And this fool, her brother, follows her tail like a faithful dog. Smiling at her thoughts, the woman decided to continue the conversation. Yes, I'm also looking forward to summer, she replied, extending her hand to the girl. Selena was surprised by this answer from Vars's sister, but Vars himself was even more surprised by his sister's reaction. The girl took Cynthia by the arm, and they continued on their way. Ignoring her brother, the woman walked arm in arm with her new relative towards the dining room, and Vars could only look on, surprised and dumbfounded. The evening passed without incident, and everyone enjoyed their own meal. However, Vars was surprised to notice that his wife, for some reason, didn't even look him in the eye today. And he wondered what he had done. Probably all because of his sister. They met for the first time recently, so Selena is careful. He decided, putting pieces of meat cut up at that moment. Since it's the capital, Selena kept up a small talk. Everything is the same as here, the guest replied to her daughter-in-law's question. And yet, I think the capital has many beautiful buildings and unique places, Selena added, shining like the sun. At that moment, Cynthia asked what Selena's homeland was like, to which she replied that in the southwest there were many flowers, and there was a lot of humidity, but she immediately stopped short, realizing she had said too much. Selena wondered if everyone was paying attention to what she was saying. It was as if her homeland was really in the southwest. She still clearly remembers the 29 years of her life in Yumi's body, but her homeland is not the southwest of the empire, but South Korea. She thought with horror that her mood had been ruined by such a small mistake. Vars thought with a smile that this poor witch had forgotten about her amnesia. Or maybe she found out about her homeland beforehand. Well, good. But that wasn't what bothered him, and what worried him most was his own sister. However much she knows about his wife, she has probably already guessed that Selena is a witch. If so, it could be dangerous for his bunny. All magical powers on Earth neither decrease nor increase. For a witch to increase her power, she needs to absorb it from someone. And this means multiple sacrifices among other witches. As Wurs knows, Cynthia has already absorbed more than 10, and he cannot even imagine how strong she is. If the sister thinks this power is not enough, then she may target the little bunny witch, and then Selena will have no chance against the Empress. Vars clenched his fists tightly. Get up. He instantly took his wife's hand, insisting on his point. Vars thought this family party might end for today. Without saying another word, he quickly pulled his wife away from the table. The young people walked downstairs. Neither wanted to talk to each other. However, Vars noticed how the girl's mood changed, and to somehow diffuse the situation, he asked if Selena had grown. Do you think I haven't grown enough yet? The girl was surprised, but when Vars answered negatively, she just chuckled and walked away from him. Indeed, the man didn't know how to politely say that she looked like an adult woman, and that's why he could only look after the offended girl, who was leaving, and scatter ashes over her head. Selena really got very angry. Of course, she is smaller compared to him, but that's because he is big, not because she is small. Moreover, today she was wearing open clothes and heels. During dinner, Vars did nothing but peel shrimp for her, but he didn't eat them himself, nor does he know if he can forgive him. He really looks like a child to her. After dinner, the Empress calmly finished her tea in her chambers. At that moment, Yart entered the room and ceremoniously bowed to the lady. He was interested in how things were going with the Empress. Cynthia noticed that there was still work to be done. Yart added that nothing had changed and asked if she would be with His Highness during the full moon. This question surprised the girl. She sincerely didn't understand why she would do this, but the knight was quite surprised by her answer. He thought with horror that she was already about to refuse and, in a panic, looked for ways to achieve consent. Even if he tried, it wouldn't work. So he knelt down and begged her to answer what he should do to satisfy her. The Empress looked inquisitively at the kneeling knight. Well, you have nothing to give me. I have everything I want. She replied, but there was something he could do, and Yart came up with it. She was very interested to know why Vars was looking for the witch. It was as if Yart had been electrocuted. She knew everything. The knight was frightened, and he will have to choose his words carefully so as not to harm His Highness, in no way. So he replied that a malevolent spirit had recently been noticed near the castle, which seemed suspicious. The whole body was bandaged. During the investigation of its activity, they discovered that at the foot of the snowy mountain, many items that were probably used by witches were sold a long time ago. The Empress listened emotionlessly as the knight spoke of how they assumed it was an evil spirit, a witch, and therefore they were now hunting her. Seeing the woman's reaction, the knight knew that she knew all this, and although he slightly changed the story, there was no need to prove that she knew more. Your words cannot be trusted. She put the cup on the saucer with a clatter. Vars received a circle of souls. The girl asked the knight and understood everything from his reaction. She asked directly if it could be that Vars is raising a witch, and that is why he wants to catch other witches to feed her. Although this was not the case, the knight was surprised by the Empress's line of thought. He made a mistake as soon as he entered this room. It is a coincidence that His Majesty arrived in the north at the time when the master was in a difficult situation. She noticed everything, from breathing and pupil movement to any facial muscle movement. She was not interested in the answer to the question. She wanted to know if he knew everything. Your Highness, we have big problems. The knight addressed his master mentally, trembling with horror. At that moment, Archduke Vars Belias was resting in his room, pondering the current situation. Thoughts came to his head one after another, changing his mood from good to bad. But one thought still made him smile. Although Selena was upset, she would probably come to him today too because she is very scared. However, at that moment, he heard a knock on the window behind which Yart was standing. The knight reported that it was impossible to hide anything from His Majesty, and she already knows that they received the Circle of Souls, and they are looking for the witch. The knight added in a panic that it was only a matter of time before she realized that the lady was a witch, to which Vars agreed without emotion. So Yard, with all due seriousness, asked for permission to go to the palace and kidnap the crown prince. They say he won't survive if His Majesty dies. Ordering the assistant to calm down, the Archduke said that although his sister had come here unexpectedly, he was prepared for it. The crown prince was invited under a suitable pretext, so he will be here in 10 days. Under an appropriate pretext, Vars meant the Empress who came to the Belias estate because she was interested in his brother's wife, but who is now suffering from severe pains all over her body and is literally on the verge of death because the frost has ravaged the north for a long time. Even lying in bed, she continues to call her son. If he is a real son, he should come quickly and show himself to his mother before something terrible happens. There is a high probability that the emperor will come with the prince, but nothing can be done. But in reality, Bars knew his sister better than anyone. If she wants something, she will definitely get it if necessary. She is even willing to deprive her opponents of all their limbs. It is necessary to develop a plan before she pays more attention to Selena. They must keep their sister's beloved son close to them as insurance. Then she won't be able to act quickly without fear of harming her own son. It would be good to find that strange bandaged witch as soon as possible, but it is better to work hidden than quickly. So you must be careful not to give your sister any more information, Vars added. Zart was about to leave, but Vars asked about his sister Methil. The knight seemed very interested in knowing if she had truly fully recovered. In fact, Vars is bothered that she keeps getting between him and Selena. The knight didn't understand at all why the knight was interested in this, but she answered affirmatively, of which Vars' belly is withered. If she was a little sick, he could use her treatment as an excuse. As things stood, he became even more irritated remembering how the maid interfered in his relationship with Selena. Yart understood everything differently than it really was, and was moved by the fact that the knight had opened his heart to love. And now he could understand the feelings of other people. For him too, the most important thing in the world is family, and for His Majesty, the Crown Prince is the main treasure. After facing perhaps his only weakness, his humanity awakened. Spring has finally arrived in the north. The knight rejoiced. The cheerful knight said that thanks to the master's care, his sister is now in very good condition. Her vision is also good, and she can move normally, so she doesn't need further treatment. Bars was tired of listening to the knight's ramblings, and moreover, miss Selena very much. At that moment, the girl went out onto the balcony to breathe the fresh spring evening air. Billions of stars shone in the sky above her head. It really was a beautiful place. A sound below caught her attention, and looking down, she saw a horse rider. It was Archduke Bars, Belias himself out for a ride. She looked at him with delight. This man was her husband, the most reliable and handsome man in the world. If you think about it like that, what happened to that man named Robin? If Selena hadn't also known Bars, she would have thought that rats and birds had been eating him for a long time. But when she got to know him better, he turned out to be completely different. He is incredibly kind, caring, a little shy, but very attentive. The girl also remembered that he also gave her a bracelet. She immediately lifted her skirt to look at the gift she loved so much in her heart. But she was interested in how it was filmed. It was Vars who gave it to her, and she wants to manipulate it carefully, but no matter how much she turned it, she couldn't see the clasp anywhere. The girl thought about it for a moment, but decided not to insist too much, because then she would ask Vars everything she wanted. And faced with these pleasant thoughts and memories, I blushed slightly. Although he is a bit harsh, he is a good husband to her. Of course, his joke with the ghost was harsh, and it offended her greatly. But at least, Selena doesn't think he hurt anyone without reason. Most likely, he sent Robin to her hometown, also warning him never to return to the north again. A beautiful girl looked dreamily into the distance from her balcony, breathing in the fresh evening air. But she was interested in knowing where the soul of the real Selena, whose body she ended up in, went. Originally, all this should have belonged to her, but she wants to stay here forever. That means she is greedy. She really feels sorry for the real Selena. But maybe she should pretend she knows nothing and move on with her life. All this time, while Selena was thinking on her balcony, Vars was watching her intently, and the girl's face was so pure, open, and inspired that it was impossible to take his eyes off her. This incredibly beautiful witch is my wife, the man thought with delight looking at her. Perhaps tonight she will also come to his bedroom. A new day has arrived, brightly illuminated by the warm spring sun. The man's foot was tapping nervously on the floor. Bars Belias was sitting in a chair like a statue, and was indignant that she hadn't come yesterday. He decided it was fine, waited for her intently at the table hoping to see her. And the girl did not keep him waiting. She approached with a smile and asked how he slept. In fact, the Archduke couldn't sleep, and, a little irritated, he asked why she hadn't come yesterday. Selena sincerely did not understand why she had to come to him yesterday. Then the man explained that he thought she was afraid of Neffis and that she would come to him. The girl's mood changed instantly. She confirmed that this had happened before, but moved a few steps away from him. Pouting her lips, she added that he was mocking her when he talked about Neffis. It was very cruel. Forgive me. Bars immediately bowed his head, feeling guilty. He added that he was wrong and apologized again, but they looked very sincere. The girl opened one eye slightly, thinking that she was actually not angry at all anymore. But she likes how awkward he feels when he asks for her forgiveness. And yet one must know when to stop. She decided, and extending her hand, ordered him to take her to the market fountain. This attitude from the girl slightly offended Archduke Vars Velias, but he couldn't refuse her. Although she treats him like her subordinate knight, he decided to play along. And he extended his hand in response. "It is an honor for me," he added, kneeling in front of her. And then the girl looked tenderly at the man sitting next to her. Vars also looked at her, a little embarrassed by the direct and open gaze. They sat together by the fountain in the market square, enjoying each other's company. But the lovely couple had involuntary observers. The Empress watched them from the window of her room in the hotel, and she was surprised that they were not ashamed to sit like that. At the same time, she asked her subordinate what was happening with the investigation, and she received the answer that in the morning they began to act much more secretly. So the investigation was progressing slower. Well, she had let them know that she had initiated an investigation, so it was to be expected. Despite his stupidity, he is a beast on the battlefield. If the Northerners had conducted a quick investigation and used Vars's overwhelming power, they would have ended the matter. The main thing is not to block access to information, but to hide it and suppress it later. In fact, Vars is not a good guy at all, and his idiotic subordinates don't even know how to get information. On the other hand, this girl looks like a small, weak, smiling animal. "Devon, find the witch," she ordered her subordinates. "Let them comb the area, starting from Velia's palace and the surrounding lands up to the 10,000-year snowy mountain, and the borders of the central region, not forgetting to search the villages adjacent to the mine." It seems she tried to hide it from everyone, but no one compares to the royal bones. Judging by what they are doing, there is more than an 80% chance that the witch is hiding somewhere around here. How dare she raise a witch behind his back? A malicious smile touched the Empress's lips, but she decided to think that this was a gift for her beloved sister and enjoy what was happening. Her little brother was very charming. At that moment, Selina had already sat near the fountain and invited her husband to return. The girl was in a wonderful mood, and Vars was in the same mood when he looked at her lovingly. They passed a jewelry store, and the girl stopped for a moment, looking at them. The Duke slowed down beside her, looking surprised at what interested her there. The elegant blue hairpin caught the girl's eye, but after a couple of moments, she turned away and continued on her way, as if nothing interested her. Selina's long blonde hair waved beautifully in the wind. The man thought, if her hair is that long, then she definitely needs those things. But for some reason, he decided not to buy it. And he followed the girl, but he was stopped by someone's tenacious hand. His gaze instantly sharpened. Who dared to grab him so brazenly? But when he turned to look the man in the face, a cry of fear escaped his throat. "Buy it, idiot!" His sister stood in front of him, literally on the verge of anger. Cynthia, a real woman, was indignant at her own brother's stupidity. But Vars did not argue, especially since he himself noticed this hairpin, and turning to the salesman, he asked for one piece. A couple of moments later, he was already successfully catching up with Selina, who had gone ahead, holding a small linen bag. The girl noticed that he was returning quite quickly, and she added that she didn't call him because it seemed like he was talking to his sister. Vars at that moment thought that he, apparently, was not the only one who feared his sister. After all, she was a witch. Selina began to look around, wondering where Cynthia had gone. But when the Archduke asked her why she was interested, she hesitated a little, and she explained that she was worried because she didn't know the rules of the aristocrats. "And I thought it would be best to accompany her sister to the inner palace, if Vars doesn't mind. After all, she is a member of his family who came from afar to see him." Both are confused because they cannot incriminate each other, but first they must take care of the family. For the family, these words from the Duke filled him with such a pleasant feeling that he had never experienced before. "I don't mind, I'll tell her," he replied softly, shaking the girl's hand. But already in the room, he bitterly regretted his words. He was so intoxicated by that atmosphere that he probably went crazy because he let it out. The most terrible misfortune to fear he brought upon himself, but he could not refuse Selina, who desired this so much and asked him with her entire appearance. "I couldn't refuse," the Archduke finally conceded. But then a very fascinating, and at the same time terrifying idea occurred to him. "It seems that now we will have to ask her to sleep together. We need to be close even while sleeping." It's not that he pursues other goals. It's just that he can protect the bunny from the evil witch. And nothing more than that. Duke Varspilius firmly decided. The man decided not to waste time coming to such conclusions and immediately headed to his wife's room. Very quickly, he found himself at the door of his wife's room. As soon as he knocked on the doors, they immediately opened, and Selina appeared right in front of him. The girl screamed in fear and tried to cover herself, but couldn't. Blushing, she offered to go in, and he apologized and did so. He was embarrassed by the girl's appearance, so he tried not to look at her. But Selina was interested in knowing why he had come. At that moment, the door opened, and Anna, whom Selina had been waiting for, entered the room. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the room became very tense, and somewhere in the distance, a crow seemed to caw. So Anna immediately expressed the desire to come in later and closed the door. Selina and Vars looked at each other uncomfortably and realized that the situation was becoming even more awkward. Maybe we can sit down, the girl suggested, trying to calm the atmosphere. And in the end, they sat opposite each other on the sofa, but remained silent. Vars was the first to break the silence and said that he had asked Sart to send a letter asking his sister to come. Selina was very happy about this and asked when Cynthia would actually arrive. She was worried because Vars looked very serious, but it seemed she was still mistaken. He was really worried that she might feel uncomfortable, but in reality, he was only worried about the fact that the girls didn't have an outer dress. And she looked so light and so cute. But he added aloud that it was still unclear whether the sister would come or not. They would know when Tart arrived. And if his sister stays in the inner palace, they will have to share a room for some time. Vars snapped out why he had come to his room. The bunny's ears perked up in surprise, looking with big blue eyes. Vars continued by saying that his sister Cynthia entered the imperial family after marriage, and that he himself was not a frivolous person, so he thinks it would be good to show her that he and Selina get along well. But he doesn't think she will come, so he shouldn't worry too much. Am I the one who is worried here and not you? The girl asked mentally, lowering her gaze, trying not to look at the man sitting opposite her. Moreover, she was trying to hold back tears, which was not what she expected. Vars noticed that her mood was no longer so cheerful, and it seemed like she was about to cry. If you were expecting a battle with a monster, anyone would cry. It's a shame he can't soften up on this issue. It's enough not to say no. At that moment, someone knocked on the door, and each of them turned towards the sound. But no one dared to get up. They didn't want to disturb such a good atmosphere. I'll go and sit like a real knight. Vars was the first to get up. Opening the door, he asked quite brusquely what he wanted, and Sart was behind the door. The knight was very excited and wondered what was written in this letter, because His Majesty immediately replied that she would arrive at the inner palace tomorrow. Crossing his arms over his chest, Wars explained that the Duchess had expressed her desire to invite her, so he simply asked his sister for her opinion. So you're saying she'll be here tomorrow? I understand, replied Bars and tried to close the door. But Dart stood firm. The knight was worried and wondered if this was temporary because tomorrow is the full moon, and they don't know when she will return to the capital, but they cannot allow her to stay in the inner palace indefinitely. And it's not that you are against it, but they need to find an excuse for her to leave. At that moment, Selina, who was in the room, listened carefully to the conversation, but she didn't understand everything. There was an awkward silence between Vars and Yart, each thinking that something unnecessary might have been said. Yart was very concerned about the fact that tomorrow the situation might look as if an eagle had been released into the forest with squirrels. This definitely cannot be allowed. Full moon, said the Archduke rebelliously, drawing out the words, and he added that, in any case, they would sleep in the same bedroom tonight, while ordering Yard to tell Anna to move the Duchess's things to his room. Without listening to the knight's objections, he persistently escorted him out of the room. Tomorrow is the full moon. Vars couldn't believe he had forgotten something so important. But now there are more important things to do, and he returned to the girl who was waiting for him. Vars told her that it was Tsart, who said his sister would arrive tomorrow. He also added that he asked her to help her move to his room right now. And he also offered to take a walk while it was messy. Selina was wrapped in a light robe, but accepted his proposal. The man noticed that if he continued walking like this, she would definitely catch a cold, so he asked her to give him a towel. The girl did not expect this at all and was very surprised, but still agreed to his request. Duke Vars Velias was carefully drying his wife's blonde hair with a fluffy towel. Selina sat, trying not to move, while Vars dried her wet hair. This had happened before, but today it felt very strange. It seemed that today would definitely be their wedding night. The man carefully and thoroughly dried the girl's wet hair for quite some time. Enjoying her company, Bars removed the towel from his hair, took a lock of hair in his hands and ran it through it. "It tickles," the girl commented, and the man immediately backed away. He was afraid that he had hurt her and immediately tried to justify himself by saying it was an accident, with which the girl laughed and explained that nothing hurt her. And she thought that, on the contrary, those touches felt so pleasant and tender to her. Sitting like this with him by the fireplace, she forgets about all the bad things that happened. And her heart beats again. A few hours later, deep night fell over the palace, and the young couple returned to the room. It seemed that everything was ready, and they could enter. It was as if nothing had changed in the room. There were only things from the closet, and from the girl's dressing table. If they live in the same room with Bars, his attitude towards her will be the same as before, when he so tenderly dried her hair. If he behaved this well every night, her heart would completely stop. At that moment, Selina was worried about something else that would quite spoil the mood. Bars was still on the threshold of the room, and the girl thought he was going to come in. "I need to go somewhere, go to bed first," she said in a colorless voice and left the room. Selina didn't even have time to be surprised when she was left completely alone in the room. The man instantly slammed the door shut and leaned against it on the other side. He is so nervous that he cannot be alone with her, but first he needs to meet his sister. The girl stared at the closed doors for quite a long time. A huge disappointment filled her soul. Seriously, he just left. So indifferent, the girl's hands clenched helplessly into a fist. An unpleasant and vile man. Tears appeared in her eyes, and her legs stopped supporting her. Why did I like him at all? She lowered her head and burst into tears. No one in the palace could even imagine what Selina Velias was feeling right now behind the closed doors of her husband's room. The Duke at that moment went to the room where his sister was. He gently knocked on the door and stepped inside the room from the half-open doors. A voice invited him in, which Vars did, accompanied by an unusual very strong smell. Cynthia was sitting at a table full of all kinds of containers, and without turning around, she asked him what he needed. But the brother still didn't dare to say it, and stood silently looking at his sister. "How can I know if you're silent?" the Empress asked, but Vars replied that this is inherited among them. She spent more time with her parents than he did. She really didn't hear anything, and now Cynthia remained silent in response, in no hurry to answer his question. "Do you remember the story of the Witch of Belias and the giants?" She finally turned around and asked her brother. Vars remembered that, when he was little, his mother used to tell him this fairy tale before bed. Yes, this story was passed down from generation to generation, like the myths about the founding of the world. When the first Grand Duke, Levidas Belias, arrived in the north, a witch already lived in this place, and two giant brothers. They showed friendship towards Levidas. The story says that the four soon became friends, and they laid the foundation for the development of the north. The giants who have mastered the power of the ancient demon Crawdon are radically different from witches. These are hybrids born from Crawdon and a human woman who directly inherited the demon's power. This was an offer for his family to receive help from transcendent beings. Transcendent beings. After Vars's curse first appeared, Cynthia investigated everything related to it, but she found nothing, as if someone was deliberately trying to hide it. As Vars knows, the average age at which noble men marry in this country is 24 to 28 years old. This is a big difference from his family, where they marry around 18 years old. It's not strange. The Empress asked her brother and received an affirmative answer. There is more background in a myth than in a fairy tale. The tragedy of Belias began when the witch fell in love with Levidas. The witch, who did not shy away from any trouble, went mad with anger and betrayal when he married another woman. Everything that awaits you ahead will sink into oblivion. She cast such a curse upon Belias, but not all her friends cursed Levidas. The giant, the respected elder of the brothers, blessed the eternal love of the couple. The giant, the mischievous younger of the brothers, was filled with curiosity to know what the couple's first night would be like. But Levidas caught him and scolded him. However, he had no malicious intentions and was forgiven to regain Levidas's trust. They cast spells for children on him that help stabilize and develop his inner world. Fortunately, the magic of the younger giant lifted the witch's curse of destruction. Therefore, the descendants of his family chose around the age of 10. And as soon as the curse manifested, a ceremony was held. After the first night passed, the curse disappeared without a trace. These words from his sister made Vars think deeply. The reason he had to fight on the battlefield is because Vars couldn't break the curse as his parents died too young. And when Cynthia found out all this, it was already too late. Moreover, Vars has already announced that he is leaving the war. He also said that he would marry immediately, so she thought the curse would soon be lifted. And he didn't even contact him. You said it all starts with marriage. Vars asked, sinking deeper and deeper into unpleasant feelings. Matrimonial ceremonies, to be precise, replied the sister, and a very logical thought occurred to her. Since the curse wasn't connected yet, and you haven't consummated the marriage yet, she asked angrily, and Vars just lowered his head guiltily. He couldn't stand the bloodlust that overcame him every 15 days. It seemed that among all feelings and desires, only vicious ones prevailed in him. When dawn broke the next day and the sun appeared on the horizon, he felt helpless, due to the inability to control his own body for several hours, because he turned into a real monster. It seemed to Vars that he would never be able to feel anything like happiness. The news that after the first wedding night, the curse disappeared without a trace gave him some hope, and it's really that he went through all this only because there wasn't any person nearby who could reveal the truth to him. Damn it! A sudden awareness painfully struck him. It's not that he didn't. He didn't even give his first kiss. Only then did Cynthia realize what her brother had done. Or rather not done. You haven't consummated the marriage yet. His sister's words seemed to fall on his head like a stone. She thought annoyingly, because all this reminded her of the fairy tales about love her mother told when she was a child. And even this idiot, her brother, resembled his father. What a fool, and the country needs him, but still, the girl said that she had prepared a potion that would help him tomorrow. And she asked him to stop sitting here like an abandoned dog in the rain. He looks very strange. The next morning, Vars got up very early and was fully dressed, waiting for Selina to wake up. The girl slept peacefully in her bed, exhausted by the events of the previous night. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she thought that she disliked the idea of sharing a bed with him so much, that she even fell asleep crying. But there must be a reason why she still accepted this proposal. Maybe he can use this reason to persuade her just once. The man felt uncomfortable with himself and his thoughts. He felt like a real bastard for having such a disgusting thought in his head. He put his hand into the inner pocket of his vest and took out a small linen bag that Vars wanted to give her. But the packaging was damaged, just like him. She probably hated the idea of loving a monster like him, but she accepts staying forever condemned as long as Selina stays with him. The man carefully took a lock of golden hair and brought it to his nose. And the second after, frightened by his actions, he instantly retreated from the bed, thinking about what to do. Succumbing to a moment of panic, he quickly ran out of the room. However, the girl didn't sleep during all this time. She saw and felt everything he did. Vars was just stroking her hair, she thought with a racing heart, and her gaze fell on the linen bag nearby. She picked it up, thinking the Archduke had forgotten something. Upon opening the bag, she was surprised to find in it a hairpin she had liked at the market. The girl instantly got out of bed and went to the mirror nearby. While trying on the hairpin, she began to feel that Vars liked it. Can he think that? He made it clear to her that he did not want to share a room with her, but he prepared a gift for her. Selina thought that it wasn't like that at all, but by spending money and taking the time to care for her, she believes she will be able to afford to be more active with him in the future. At that moment, the Archduke returned to the room, catching the girl by surprise. He arrived in the middle of her thoughts, and her thoughts ran like a frightened bird. The girl tried to find an excuse to touch him, perhaps to smooth his hair, but she decided it was stupid. She decided to act actively so that she could get closer to him, so she grabbed his clothes. And she couldn't utter a word. But what to say to him to sound sweet? What things do men find charming? I was waiting for you, she said in a trembling voice, trying to look him in the eyes. However, this had the exact opposite effect and made Vars freeze in horror. Ashamed of her behavior, she realized she had been stupid. Selina lowered her head, burying herself in his chest. But Vars, surprised by her behavior, gently stroked her head. Aren't you cold? He asked the girl worriedly, concerned that she might be sick. Selina pulled her hand away from him and assured him that everything was fine with her. The Archduke insisted that it was better for her to bundle up, as she was wearing light clothes. So he sat the girl on the bed and covered her with a blanket. In fact, he felt extremely relieved that she was fine. For a second, he thought that she had suffered from aphasia due to the shock of having to share a room with him. So he uttered unusual words at her. But now she started talking as usual. However, what the heck was that? Maybe she just wasn't completely awake yet. Selina's goal was achieved. The Archduke was fascinated by her tenderness. Closer to lunch, a carriage quickly entered the residence. The woman who emerged from it couldn't believe she had to travel such a long way for Vars's sake. "I was waiting for you," said respectfully the head housekeeper who greeted her. "Long time no see, Anna," replied the Empress amicably. The maid's eyes reflected genuine respect for this great woman. A few years ago, she sent her to the Duchy of Belize with an order that only Knight Anna could fulfill. And now head maid Anna stood before her Empress with a sinking heart. Cynthia asked if anything interesting had happened during her absence and received a negative answer. Smiling, she added that she would trust her word. For the sake of the Empress, Anna is willing to do anything, and she knows it. Knight Anna was one of the few people in whom Cynthia awoke unconditional trust. "So let's go visit my dear daughter-in-law," said the woman. When Anna was 20, Lady Cynthia went to the capital to avenge her father. And she also followed him to the central part of the country and joined the Imperial Knights. Her goal was to help the lady carry out the revenge and make those people suffer in the same way. When the lady finally got her revenge, she personally asked for something personal. "They say that this stupid young man literally lives on the battlefield," began the Empress. And she ordered Anna to help her brother Vars in Belize in everything. Anna, a true knight, accepted her mistress's order without question. She purposely got herself injured and left the knights. Going to Belize, she began to serve Vars. And now, after so many years, the Empress returned to her homeland and was eager to see her daughter-in-law. She didn't even send a letter asking how Anna was, but it doesn't matter. Lady Cynthia has always been like this. She promised to serve her for the rest of her life, and the Empress is the most powerful person to her. It seems that every time she faces a choice, the first thing she will think of will always be her mistress. But Anna was not against this turn of events at all. She felt that this was her destiny. Selina tried on a new gift from her husband and happily showed off near the mirror, looking at herself from all sides. Vars also did not take his eyes off his beautiful wife for a second. "Beautiful?" the girl asked, turning around and smiling charmingly. And the man actively nodded, mentally adding that she was always the most beautiful. The girl blushed slightly and thanked him for such a wonderful gift. However, his words puzzled the Duke a little, and Selina was also puzzled. "I mean you, not the hairpin," the man decided to clarify. Because of these words, the girl blushed even more and was embarrassed, even screaming mentally in surprise. She couldn't say anything. She just kept blushing silently without knowing what to do with herself out of shame. Seeing her reaction, Vars was surprised, thinking this couldn't be happening, but it seemed as if she was hearing compliments about her appearance for the first time. A pleasant warmth spread through the man's body, because he really thought his wife was beautiful. The next moment, he was beside her. "Didn't you know how beautiful she was?" he asked, extending his hand to her. Vars carefully brushed a lock of blonde hair from her face and ran his hand over it. The intimate moment was interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Jart who arrived, and he was very scared when, in response to his call, something crashed loudly from the other side. The next moment, the door opened slightly, and the face of Duke Belize appeared in it. Wondering what had happened, the assistant handed the documents to the lord, saying that an eagle had just arrived, and that the papers contained everything he needed to know about his squirrel. "What kind of squirrel is ours?" The Archduke started getting furious. This time, Selina did not listen silently to their conversation, and looking behind her husband, she greeted Jart. The knight was glad to see the lady and asked if she had slept well. Selina thanked him for his concern and added that if the conversation was long, then they should go. And Settleyard was about to enter the room, but Vars stopped him. "The conversation is over." The Archduke accepted no objections, and the knight had to agree. Vars closed the door behind him, happy to have finally dismissed the stranger. But Selina suddenly said she would like to go out. "I think they haven't sorted everything out yet, so you'll go later," he replied. The man, at the same time, he placed the documents that Jart had brought into her hands. Taking these papers, Selina was surprised to see her portrait and realized that this was information about the real Selina. At first, she was afraid that her secret had been revealed and fearfully raised her eyes to her husband. Vars noticed her worry, but did not want to say anything bad, and so he simply smiled sweetly at the girl, thus calming her down. "Did you say you have amnesia? I asked you to look up some information. Maybe it will help you restore your memory," he added. Selina sincerely thanked him, feeling some relief at his explanation. "Do you want me to remember everything?" asked the girl excitedly. The man replied that he actually didn't care, and Selena excitedly grabbed the paper. Anyway, she will live with him in the north now, so her past doesn't matter. But she thought this information would be useful to her. Honestly, Vars would like her to continue remembering nothing and still be an unknown witch. His greatest fear is that one day her memories will return, and she will suddenly leave because she wants to return to her hometown. Nothing in the world matters as long as she stays by his side. The girl was happy that her past didn't matter to him. However, her gaze tore a line from the document. She loves wine from the Lafun province. For some reason, this particular sentence bothered her very much. She reread it carefully, trying to understand the meaning, and realized what bothered her. Because, apparently, they had already discussed something like this, then she almost gave herself away. At a recent dinner with Barsa's sister, she replied without thinking that her city is in the southwest. There are always many flowers, and it is very humid. However, this memory brought her some too strange feelings, and dragged along earlier memories as well. Don't even touch other alcoholic beverages. You should only drink a glass of wine from the La Fan province. The words of a man came to her mind. He gave her an order and asked if she understood, to which Selena replied that she would take note. Previously, she unconditionally obeyed this man, as she had no other choice. Now the documents fell from the girl's hands. She didn't understand what had just happened. The Archduchess staggered as if about to fall. Could it be that those were the memories of the real Selena? And as the restless Vars held the girl by the shoulders, she thought that it was not her will, but that she was the one who stole the body, the husband, and the life from the real Selena. However, the real soul of Selena, from whom everything was taken, is still in this body. And although she cannot return what is rightfully hers, she clearly wants it. Vars was sincerely worried about his wife's condition and noticed that she had turned pale and could barely stand. Looking at the pile of papers scattered around, he guessed that it was because of these documents, but nothing special was written there. The ordinary life of an illegitimate daughter of a noble family, especially since it's not even her real life. Perhaps this is the problem, he thought. At that moment, the girl regained consciousness and silently called her husband by his name. "Do you think I am beautiful?" she asked, and her eyes were very sad. Without hesitation, the man replied that of course he thought so. He hoped his words would make the girl smile. However, she didn't change her face at all and remained silent. Moreover, she pushed his hand away and took a step back. If his answer was wrong, it seemed to her that she had just been happy. But why did her mood suddenly change so dramatically? Vars? He wanted her to cheer up after hearing the answer she wanted. But he had another way to cheer her up, and then he asked her to go with him, as he had business in the city. And it worked instantly. Feeling increasingly tender towards the girl in front of him, the Archduke leaned slightly and offered her his hand. Selena's mood improved a little, and she made a decision. And she placed her hand in his big masculine palm. Then she dragged him, surprising him that they would leave immediately. The girl resolutely headed towards the palace exit, but her mind wandered somewhere far away. People are so insidious that she knows he is not that kind to her because of her appearance. But she cannot believe he asks such stupid questions. She is sad because this is not her real face, and she is jealous of the true owner of this body. She also feels guilty for stealing someone else's life, fearing the pain that awaits her in the future. The pain that will invade her when Yumi's soul disappears, and Vars won't even notice. The moment he approaches her, these feelings seem to evaporate. This handsome man looks at her, with eyes that will lift her spirits. But still, the girl decided she would think about the future later, and now would just enjoy the moment. She doesn't know what will happen next. The person she likes now is Vars Velias, and she will definitely be his beloved. The girl decided and stopped for a second, turning abruptly towards him. In a burst of feelings, she pressed against the wide masculine chest in a kind of embrace. The Archduke immediately felt the brush of a young and elastic chest against his hand, and out of the corner of his ear, he heard her asking what business he had in the city. Trying to contain the growing feelings, she wondered mentally what business the great Duke of the North could have in the city. It was just an excuse to make her feel better, but he couldn't tell her out loud because he didn't dare to bother his wife, especially seeing how happy she was at that moment. "Since you have decided to live in a separate bedroom, you must choose a rug that you like," he began, but he suddenly stopped, doubting this was a sufficient excuse. Deciding this would not justify his actions, he fell silent abruptly, but nothing better occurred to him. He really understood everything, thought Vars, not daring to add anything else. but the girl decided it was a great idea and still needed to buy some fine blankets. At the same time, she thought she still needed to meet his sister, while Vars couldn't believe he had accepted such a ridiculous answer. And so they were walking through the town towards the shop, when unexpectedly they ran into a person. Right in front of them was the Empress herself, Vars Velias's sister. The Duke mentally tried to chase her away, and Selina was incredibly happy that Cynthia also decided to go out to the city. And she added that she wanted to visit her earlier, but thought she was too busy preparing. So she didn't, but she was glad to meet her by chance. Then let's have dinner together, suggested the Empress, seeing that her brother didn't want this so much. And she wanted to insist even more on it. Of course, the girl was happy about this, and Vars immediately wilted. And now they were sitting together at the dining table, eating the food they were offered. Vars served Selina pieces of various foods again and again, taking care of her this way. Vars Velias is known not only for his brute strength, but also as a natural strategist. Seeing everything she has done so far, he is sure that she cannot eat much because she has a small stomach. But she definitely enjoys the food. In other words, having dinner together is a great opportunity to grow before his eyes. That's enough for me, you can start eating. The girl tried to stop his favor, and when the man asked her if she didn't like it, she of course started denying it, saying the food was delicious, but she didn't have time to eat it all. The Empress watched this makeshift couple from the side, thinking her brother was so foolish. It seems Selina has little affection for him and treats him like a husband, but he can't find a place for himself. Vars, I already thought about this before, why don't you address your wife properly? She asked her brother, and she added that she understands the awkwardness of an arranged marriage, but when he behaves like this, people say there are no adults at home. Therefore, from now on, you must call her dear, which instantly made Vars blush like a tomato. The Archduke didn't understand why this witch, his sister, was helping him. The Empress at that moment thanks Selene for treating her brother well. But if he does something wrong, she must tell him, and she will scold him. But Cynthia also thought that although Selene seemed stupid, a witch was a witch. Her intentions, of course, were questionable, but it wouldn't hurt to win Selene's favor. And the girl at that moment was incredibly happy and literally shone from this whole situation. After all, her daughter-in-law is now on her side, and she is much calmer now because they have become one family. It's true, dear, she awkwardly addressed her husband for the first time. Vars tried hard to maintain a calm expression, but his cheeks turned red, and the girl's words went straight to the heart. A long time ago, the capital's tea house witnessed an awkward situation. A young man accidentally spilled a cup of hot tea on a young woman's light dress. Then Cynthia met her husband, the current emperor, and thought she could use him. The girl thought strategically from an early age. Having decided to take revenge on the emperor responsible for her father's death, she forgot about her human feelings, and she was ready to act by any means. The house was carried out for any witch. She used all the ghosts before the Empress, and even this smiling and carefree man. The young man smiled happily and said he had nothing at all, but marrying her was like a dream. And although Cynthia's goals were completely different, this attitude towards her convinced her. She was sure that strength lies in fear and acted accordingly. Even many years later, when she dealt with everyone, the aristocrats of the capital are still afraid of her. Even her younger brother, born of blood, fears her, and rightly so. But in Selina, she sees a look in which there is not a drop of fear or bad thoughts. In this, she greatly resembles her husband, the emperor. It would be nice if she weren't a witch, Cynthia thought with regret. After finishing dinner, they went out together, and Selina immediately added that it was a wonderful meal. The happy girl literally danced down the street, and Vars was stopped by the Empress. She threw a small bottle into his hands, and only then did she explain that this was the medicine she had promised him. It contains Terran, so you may want to think twice before taking it. Or not. Terran is a powerful poison that can kill a dragon with just one drop. I'm not sure about the medicine I prepared, Vars commented sarcastically, to which Cynthia only chuckled. She was sure of everything. You won't die, she added to calm him down. Realizing that her brother and sister were falling behind, Selina called them. She called her husband dear and asked him to come here quickly. Okay, the man replied immediately to the call, paying no attention to the conversation with his sister. However, he did not stop holding the small bottle she gave him. Much of his life depended on this small bottle. The young people headed down the street, strolling after a hearty lunch. Selina admired everything around her. She examined every counter, and soon husband and wife moved a little ahead. They were literally wrapped in an aura of love that bounced off the Empress herself. Looking at them, the woman thought about everything that was happening. Shortly after Selene arrived in the north, information came from Anna. It contained a report from Nefis, who holds a rather high position among the ghosts, and she noticed something unusual. Nefis can make his own decisions and feel safe in his territory, and if he smells his obvious enemy, a witch, then it's worth paying attention to him, and as a result, she can be 99% sure of his report. There is at least one witch in this city. Cynthia's gaze fell on Selena, shining with happiness. She doesn't know her true intentions, but she seems to be a good girl. If we think about it seriously, then she is too good to be a witch. When people like her, and Wers see such a small and harmless creature, they naturally want to have it. She called her brother and his wife with regret, and she said she had some things to do. So she would go. What a pity. I thought we were going to walk here together. Selena was sincerely upset, and Vars at that moment became very angry because she dared to bother his wife. But Cynthia added that they would meet again in the inner palace, or that they could walk together next time. Okay, next time for sure, the girl was delighted. And the Empress confirmed it once more, looking into her daughter-in-law's sincere eyes, and smiling almost imperceptibly. As she left, she placed her hand on her brother's shoulder, and in a whisper, so only he could hear her, she added that he should behave himself. Don't be stupid, she told her brother, who was confused, and his voice sounded threatening. The next moment, she turned to Selena and said goodbye with a smile. Selena, also smiling, said goodbye to her, while Vars was shocked by his sister's behavior. This energy-sucking witch, he thought, and wondered why she was cursing. Darling, let's go, Selena asked, gently touching his hand. Instantly, Vars's soul left his body, illuminated with a happy pink light. All right, my love, the man replied in the same tone, and the happy couple continued their way to the store. Soon they entered the same store they were heading to, while choosing a blanket for the room. They discussed different options. Selena decided she liked one of them and would accept it. And this, how beautiful, she added, handing everything into Vars's hands. The man carefully examined everything she gave him, and he thought that her tastes did not match her appearance at all, while the girl looked at the things with delight, thinking that everything here was to her taste. And among all this, what she likes most, of course, are not the things in the store at all, but something else. The man next to her is her husband, Archduke Varspelias. The girl laughed happily with her thoughts, covering herself with the blanket in her hand. And at least once the Duke didn't understand what made her laugh so much, but he still invited her to our. The girl held out her hand to him and happily accepted. At night, Yard walked somewhat worriedly down the palace corridor, thinking that today was a full moon, and hoping that the knight hadn't forgotten her because of their date. Methil walked towards him with a quick step, very happy to see him, but he stopped his sister, noticing that now was not the best time and that it would be better if she came at another time. The girl reluctantly agreed, but still added that she wanted to introduce him to someone. Yart thought it was some young man and hastened to reply that it wasn't worth it. But Methil asked him, offended what he was thinking, and said she meant the doctor who cured her illness. In that case, the brother agreed, and together they went to see the doctor. All this time, Yart did nothing but stay with the master, and she was his sister, who returned to the north less than a month ago. The beloved daughter of a noble family from the north suddenly, and very seriously, fell ill, and an unknown doctor cured her by chance. This question greatly tormented the knight. Not only does he maintain a good relationship with the patient, but he also gets to know the head of the family. Really elegant, and also very suspicious from a stranger. Since Menmithil personally arranged the meeting, Jart assumed that it was the doctor who insisted on it. He is really very good, Messel happily told her brother with a smile. Well, let's see. Yard felt ashamed of his sister's reaction and awkwardly agreed with her statement. Late in the afternoon, a deathly silence reigned in the basement. Yard was already ready and was on duty near the huge doors when Varspelias approached him. He asked how his meeting with His Highness went, to which the knight replied that he told his wife not to wait for him, and that she should go to bed first. Is that what they said? Asked the discouraged knight. Navars was surprised because they had the same reaction to his words. A little earlier, Selena asked in the same way if it was true that he wouldn't be sleeping here today. The knight opened the door for the knight, inviting him in, and added that this was not the problem, to which Vars replied that there was no problem. Yart also expressed the hope that if the knight drinks all the alcohol here and falls into a deep sleep, then everything will end there, and he hopes everything will turn out well. Vars entered a room completely filled with barrels of alcohol, and the door closed tightly behind him. He took out a small vial of medicine from his pocket that his sister had given him. Looking at it, Vars thought that a witch made this potion, so he shouldn't die. But he didn't hear that there were people who took Taram and survived afterward, so he doesn't even know what the side effects might be. However, he had no other choice, and the only hope for the night to pass peacefully was alcohol, and one small bottle. Without much thought, he poured the liquid into his mouth. Before, people just drank and didn't think about any side effects. Even if something goes wrong, Yart will take care of everything, decided the Archduke, uncorking the first barrel of alcohol. But his thoughts were about something completely different, more precisely about a certain person. When Selina was choosing a blanket in the shop, she looked very happy and expressed her joy very sincerely. And Vars now reproached himself for not being able to even kiss this charming girl. Even if he gets punched in the face, he should try. After all, she is his wife, thought the man, feeling the effect of the alcohol he was drinking. What is she doing now? The man wondered, closing his eyes. And Selina at that moment was sitting in their common room in front of the mirror. The girl had just gotten out of the bathroom and thought that her husband wouldn't come today. But at least they had chosen a rug and a new blanket. If something happened, why can't she just tell him that she is actually his wife? She doesn't deserve his trust. The girl became sad. She wants to stay with him a little longer, because no one knows what will happen tomorrow. In the reflection of the mirror, the girl saw a small chest behind her. This is the box with the real Selina's things, she realized. And at that moment, two ghosts appeared behind her, watching her. And while the girl carefully looked at the chest, these ghosts carefully looked at the girl. It would seem that the night passed quite calmly, and silence reigned behind closed doors. At some point, the doors began to shake from the inside. The lock hanging on them began to tremble, which greatly frightened Yart, who was guarding the doors. Moments later, several powerful blows were heard. They were followed by such a loud sound and a blow of enormous force that the door literally shattered to pieces. And the Archduke appeared on the threshold in his bloodthirsty state. His gaze spoke for itself. The monster demanded blood. Having no idea what was happening in the palace basement, the girl saw in the reflection of the mirror a small chest behind her. This is the box with the real Selina's things, she realized, and at that moment two ghosts appeared behind her. Watching her, Selina sat in front of the chest confused, wondering what to do. She debated between leaving nothing until the real Selina returned or throwing everything away and filling the drawer with new things. But for now, the girl decided to see what was there, although she was afraid of feeling outside her body again. Now this is her life, her memories, and she should have continued living. I'll take a look and then decided the girl, gathering courage. She carefully opened the lock and lifted the lid of the mysterious chest. Inside the box were placed in an orderly pile several books, a small chest, and a bow and arrows. And that's all. The girl was surprised to see such wealth. Taking only these things, leaving her hometown and arriving in the far north, this is what Selina did. What was she thinking about at that moment? She hoped her body would be taken away, and Selina realized that she couldn't throw it away. But she wondered how to humanely get rid of all these things. It would be better if there were good dishes here and not just personal belongings, because if she throws it away, then she will be tormented by nightmares. On top of the chest were objects that were not typical for a girl. The girl was surprised to pick up a bow and arrows. Feeling unusual sensations, she stood up without letting go of the weapon. And then she pulled the bowstring, although she had never done it before. Something so familiar, what kind of feeling is this? She wondered. And then I realized that she pulled the bowstring so naturally. Even though she had never practiced archery in her life, it just seemed like she stopped thinking about it. She tried to get rid of the obsessive thoughts. And all this time, the ghosts watched her intently. However, a loud noise outside the room distracted her from her painful thoughts. There is so much noise outside today. What is happening there? Worriedly, the girl went out onto her room's balcony. Outside in the street, she saw great destruction. In the center, Vars wielded his sword, surrounded by his guards. However, although the Duke was alone, his strength was incommensurable with the strength of all the knights combined. Vars's gaze looks like that of a bloodthirsty, possessed monster. Selina wanted to scream to stop him, but they didn't let her. Cynthia, standing next to her, covered the girl's mouth with her hand and ordered silence with a signal. After releasing her, the Empress asked Selina to calm down, because now it would be foolish to try to separate them. At that moment, the knights took a defensive position, awaiting the master's attack. And Vars didn't keep them waiting long. He brandished his sword and struck his knights with a force that exceeded a man's strength. Selena was terrified by how brutally they were fighting, and Sivars was seriously wounded. Determined to stop this, the girl headed to her room. Then the Empress stopped her and insistently asked her to stay here. And do nothing. What can you do? He asked the girl. Selena couldn't answer anything. She really couldn't do anything in such a situation. And then the Empress handed her a nearby bow to shoot with. Selena shoots, she said confidently. Taking the bow in her hands, the girl looked at it surprised, not understanding what they wanted from her. Cynthia is telling her to shoot the arrow, but she doesn't even know how to do it. And it seems the Empress is not joking. She speaks with quite a bit of seriousness and confidence. In complete confusion, the girl looked at her hands holding the weapon, not understanding at all what she should do. Considering all the data Cynthia received, we can say that she is the one who knows the most about Selena's past. They reviewed everyone who had ever spoken to her, so they were able to gather a large amount of information, even about relatives. And this is enough to recreate Selena's life in her hometown. But the more she learns about it, the stranger it seems to her. The girl who always rode a horse, but never rode one in the north. She loves flowers and herbs so much that she grows them herself to dry them and prepare tea, but in the north, she doesn't even pay attention to the flower shops. The peasant girl who lived in the southwest was definitely not a witch. No witch would have forgiven having a father like hers. The one who appeared in the north before her eyes, who was she? That was the main question. Even if Selena can do everything else, there is no way to fake the experience. They say she loved hunting on horseback, so she should know what to do just by looking at a bow. Whether she became a witch or the witch changed her, she had to take the risk. Cynthia decided, pull the bowstring tight. If you don't help, Yard might lose his hand, added the Empress, urging Selena to take action. Her words had an effect because the girl confidently raised her head. The red moon was at its full strength and made Vars Velias thirsty for blood. As Cynthia said, Selena cannot allow this to happen. If this continues, it will be dangerous for both Vars and Yard. Therefore, the girl placed an arrow on her bow and took a comfortable position on the balcony to shoot. She only prayed that Vars would come to his senses. Raising her hand, she focused her gaze and directed it towards the furious Archduke. Gathering her courage, the girl pulled the bowstring and released the arrow. The Empress created a potion that combines a powerful soporific effect and a spell that slightly weakens instincts and turns the thirst for destruction into a thirst for affection. If she had more time, she would try to express this thirst in a nobler way. Unlike the witch who cursed the Belias family, there is something more. The blessing given by the giants, descendants of the ancient demon Crawdon, probably has much greater power, because the spell she casts will merge with the blessing of the giants, and it will be able to suppress the curse. They say that after the first wedding night, the curse will be lifted. As long as Selena plays her role well, there is nothing to worry about. The arrow shot by the girl whistled a centimeter away from the enraged Archduke. Although it didn't hurt him, but she made me pay attention to the person who let it go. Selene was standing on her room's balcony, bow ready to shoot another arrow at any moment. When she placed the arrow on the bowstring for the first time, she experienced a very unusual sensation. She didn't know what to do after pulling the bowstring, with a strange feeling that her body was moving on its own. After shooting the first arrow, she was surprised to realize that she had almost hit the target. And although the arrow did not hurt Vars, it drew attention to the shooter who launched it, which is why Selena got a little scared. Driven by the curse that gave him strength, the Archduke left his previous victim and turned towards the girl. He jumped and found himself on the balcony of the second floor, where Selena had just been. Although Jart was seriously wounded, he was worried about having to catch up with the master, because if he came to his senses, he would definitely die for what he had done. But before he had time to move, another man approached him, which greatly surprised him. Putting his finger to his lips, Empress Cynthia forced the knight to calm down and not move. She pointed out to him that the sun would rise in just a few minutes. And besides, she will take responsibility, so he should sit where he is sitting. Well, if something happens, thought the woman, she will have to leave and he should not be dead. At that moment, horrifying events were unfolding on the balcony of the Duchess's room. Selena thought with horror about what she had done. After all, Vars's gaze was completely abnormal, and it scared her greatly. She tried to calm him down by calling him by name and carefully backed away. However, the slipper fell off her foot, and the girl, stumbling, began to fall. Selena didn't realize how, backing away, she reached the bed in the middle of the room and fell right onto it. Panicked, she wondered where Sister Barsa was and mentally asked for help. Duke Velias loomed over her like a huge and intimidating statue. However, a pleasant sweet smell reached the man's nose, and his bloodlust subsided. But now he felt a different thirst, and without realizing it, reached out his hand to the girl. Selena closed her eyes, preparing for what would happen next, scared and defenseless. However, nothing else happened, and the girl had to open her eyes to understand what was going on. The man was still hanging over her, but now he was almost on the bed above her. With his head bowed, "Bars, you've come to your senses now," she decided to ask. At that moment, the Duke, like a wild animal, sniffed the air and looked up at her. "It's all fine now," the girl continued asking, while the man kept moving closer to her. "You still smell so sweet," he replied stupidly, when his face was just a couple of centimeters away from hers. Such a dramatic change in his behavior greatly surprised the girl, and she froze in surprise as Vars simply looked at her with a smile. The next moment, he touched her shoulder, forcing the girl to lie down on the bed. Selena did not resist, not understanding what was happening, but with a sixth sense, she guessed what would happen next. The man loomed over her, Selena said his name in a tone she had never used before. He loomed over her and placed his hands so she could not escape. The girl was very scared, thinking he would eat her. Gently touching her body, the man pressed his lips to her neck with delight, inhaling the sweet aroma emanating from her. Then, with a slight movement, he touched her hair and ran his fingers from her neck to her bare shoulder. Just a second ago, possessed by bloodlust, the man now couldn't stop, as if obsessed with her scent. Bewitched, Selena barely found the strength to resist. She did not want her first kiss to be like this. "Vars, come to your senses," the girl resisted. However, the man didn't seem to hear her, and slowly brought his lips closer to hers. The first ray of dawn entered through the open window of the room, and this sun had an instantaneous effect on the possessed one, as if he had woken up for a second from a tender and sweet sleep, and he saw a girl lying on the bed in front of him, clearly scared by his behavior. Her pristine pink lips called out to him. All he felt was how he wanted to kiss her, and he could not resist the feeling. But still, the dawn forced him to wake up from this oblivion, and the girl lying in front of him was trembling with fear, expecting what he would do to her. Realizing what was happening, Vars instantly stepped back from her. The man immediately apologized for his behavior, regretting having dared to do this to her. And the next moment, he remembered everything he had done. The way he attacked Yart, and how he smelled the sweet aroma coming from Selena. And now the girl was trembling in front of him on the bed, clearly afraid of him. Her soft pink lips drew his gaze, constantly calling out to him. It was as if Vars had found himself once again, for a moment, captivated by a sweet scent. And seductive, it seemed difficult for him to resist the girl lying so openly in front of him, and literally calling him. But she also shook herself off and moved away from him, expecting the inevitable, but this inevitable did not come. Vars realized that he was still not himself, and was surprised by what he was thinking now. And the man also expects her to feel amazement when recalling their first kiss, experiencing a feeling of tenderness, but now without the intoxicating attraction. Vars gently stroked the girl's cheek, brushing away a strand of hair that had fallen on her forehead. "Forgive me." The man leaned down carefully and kissed the frightened girl on the forehead, which surprised her greatly. For the first few moments, the girl looked at him surprised because she was preparing for the worst case. And then her eyes filled with tears, and Selena burst into tears, sitting up on the bed. She said through tears that she thought he was going to eat her. Holding the girl in his arms, Bars calmed her down by telling her he had no intention of doing anything like that. And he asked her forgiveness for his behavior. "I'm sorry I scared you, I never wanted to hurt you." He hugged Selena, who was trembling slightly. The girl was crying at that moment, and felt great relief that it was all over, and hid in his chest. While all these events were unfolding in the palace, something was also happening in one of the village houses. A figure in a long red cloak stood in front of the mirror. The hooded figure examined his bandaged body in the mirror, and finally completely took off his cloak, with the intention of examining every inch of his body. A girl looked at herself in the mirror, surprisingly resembling Selena Bellias, but completely bandaged, so that only her eyes remained visible. Rohan heard a voice from the side. The bandaged figure turned nervously. "Don't look," he put on the cloak irritably, to which his interlocutor replied that he wasn't looking, and that it was so dark that nothing could be seen. But he asked not to take off the cloak, worried that the spell might not work correctly. Rohan assured him that he should not worry about this, but the long-haired young man added that he wasn't saying this out of excitement. And he was surprised that the other person couldn't understand what he was feeling. And Rowan really couldn't understand, especially if there was so much hatred in his words. And it's better to tell him when the effect of the spell wears off, because he wants to become perfect as soon as possible. And go to him. Wait a few more days. You know it takes time. A third character has appeared in the room. The bandaged man was indignant that everything was taking too long. The third person turned out to be the same doctor who cured Methil, and he asked Rowan to rest a bit. Besides, he looked at that girl, and there is something useful that can help them in their business. After the night's incidents, Vars took a shower and once again scolded himself for being a headless idiot. From the moment his consciousness began to return, he regretted losing such a wonderful opportunity. Selina was literally a centimeter away from him, lying on the bed almost naked. She is so charming, the man admired, blushing at the memories. He remembered that he had moved too fast because of the curse's madness, and he couldn't even kiss her once. Damn it, idiot, he furiously hit his foot against the wet tiles. At that moment, a worried voice came from behind the door. Asking if everything was all right, it was Selina who heard a sort of roar, and she got worried about Bars. The Duke replied that everything was fine and wanted to say something else, but stopped dead. An unexpected thought occurred to him that he liked, and replied, without leaving the bathroom, that he was a little dizzy, which worried the girl on guard outside the door even more. You are absolutely fine, open the door. She knocked on the door, sincerely worried about her husband. At that moment, Wars came out of the bathroom, deliberately wearing nothing but a small towel around his hips. Without hesitation, Selina rushed into his arms, still worried. She invited him to lean on her. She would help him get to the sofa. Wars seemed to weigh 2 or even 3 times more than the girl, but she did her best to support him. The man thought that if he suddenly lifted her by the neck, she wouldn't even be able to resist. But with such confidence, he wanted to help her. Feigning tiredness, he agreed to her help, thinking that this was how his affection was expressed, and feeling incredibly happy about it. The girl was ready to offer him any help, so she hugged him even tighter. After apologizing, Bars leaned heavily on her with all his weight. It was obvious that Selina was having a hard time, but she didn't care at all, willing to do everything in her power. At that moment, the Archduke decided to play a little prank and pretended to fall, making Selina also stumble in horror. When she caught him, she apologized and added that for a second her legs gave way. When they reached the bed, he sat her down and asked if she wanted something to eat. At that moment, Anna knocked on the door and they were allowed to enter. Vars asked the maid who entered how Yard was feeling, to which the girl replied that, most likely, he would wake up tomorrow thanks to the Duchess. The knight didn't receive serious injuries, pointing out that the lady did a great job, but Selina didn't consider it her merit, and pointed out that it was all thanks to the advice of Her Highness's sister. Hearing the mention of his own sister, Vars immediately became angry and strictly ordered breakfast. He didn't like that Selina's attention shifted from him to other people, and at that moment the girl was thinking about breakfast and seeing how Yart was. However, Cynthia Belias was the first to visit Yart, who was injured in the battle with the Archduke. She explained that she needed to check something and did whatever she wanted, even though he asked her to be able to thank her, and at the same time handed him a vial of medicine. Yart wondered emotionally if this had anything to do with the fact that the master's anger suddenly softened in front of Her Highness. This is not anger, it is a curse passed down to the heirs of Belias, the Empress corrected in a sinister voice. The knight thought it would be nice if His Majesty could put a leash on the Duke, but it worked out even better than he expected. Only he, the one who had been with him since childhood, was pitilessly attacked. Although it is sad, he could only obey the Archduchess. With her special sense, Cynthia recognized that there was someone behind the door, and she continued to tell Yard that you can lift the curse by marrying someone you feel true love for. It's very romantic. The door was knocked on, and Anna asked permission to enter. She immediately asked about the knight's condition, and the Empress inquired about Vars's feelings. The maid replied that the knight had decided to use the top-floor bedroom for the time being, and said that he had a headache after taking some quack's medicine, alluding to his sister. It was as if a hurricane swept through the palace corridors, opening and closing room doors with incredible speed. Selina dropped onto her own bed at high speed. What did I just hear? The girl wondered, dumbfounded. Some time ago, she finally managed to visit Yart in his room. She lamented that even if it was because of the curse, he still couldn't hurt his subordinates, and she regretted that it all ended this way. When she was about to knock on the door, she heard Cynthia talking about a way to lift the curse on the Belia's family. You can break the curse by marrying someone for whom you feel true love. It's very romantic. This is exactly the curse created by the author of this book. And how cruel it is to Vars, because in the original, he never knew love in his entire life. And he lived alone until his death. But what is true love? The girl wondered, hugging her pillow. She's not sure. Everything is very complicated, but still. I won't give up. Selena was determined. She would definitely be happy with Vars. In the middle of her thoughts, the Archduke entered the room and asked her if she had seen Yard yet. The girl replied affirmatively, but did not explain all the circumstances. She realized that Vars was getting ready somewhere, and the man explained that he needed to see Yart, then briefly go to the training ground and the office of the outer palace. After ordering the girl to rest, he left the room, but Selena asked him to stay. We can talk a little. The girl looked very determined. Her serious mood did not escape the Archduke, and he stopped quickly. Last night, this curse, you know how to break it. The words were not easy for her, and Vars immediately understood what she meant. Seeing his reaction, Selena apologized for her excessive arrogance, but she couldn't directly say that she had overheard someone else's conversation. Raising her clear eyes to her husband, the girl asked if she could help him with anything. That's enough, of course. I know how to lift the curse. Her husband interrupted her abruptly, and added that it was too difficult and that she couldn't help. He will make sure that something like this never happens again, and with that, he left the room. Vars closed the door tightly, leaving the girl confused. Selena sincerely wanted to help her husband lift the curse, but why did he completely reject her help? It seems he thinks that true love does not exist for them. At that moment, the girl felt so lonely and lost. Vars at that moment walked nervously and quickly through the palace corridors. She asks if she knows how to break the curse. Of course I do. But if he had told her about this method, she would have been horrified, and most likely she would have agreed to help him, because he is very kind, and they would have spent their wedding night, after which the curse would have been lifted. Or, on the contrary, she will refuse without even looking at him, perhaps even hate him. If he was rejected so coldly, the man stopped in the middle of the corridor. If she rejects him, he won't be able to stand it. If this happens, his already difficult life will completely lose all meaning. It doesn't matter, the main thing is that she simply doesn't find out, the Archduke decided. He needs to hide this ridiculous method for lifting the curse. Varsfilias finally reached Yart's room and heard voices coming from there. Didn't you say you would prepare a medicine that would help me cope with this? The man immediately became angry and burst into the room.